Hey, welcome to Ask a Philosopher. I know it's been a while since we were doing one of these. Unfortunately, time scheduling and stuff. And Nick has something called a life that I'm not familiar with. But yeah, he has actually stuff to really do in real life. So, and I hear that he's running a pretty successful YouTube channel now.
It's been going well. We didn't have we almost had a dumpster fire yesterday. We pulled it out, but it was smoking. We had a dumpster smolder definitely, but we pulled it out.
And I think that probably one of these would be one of the bigger channels. Yes, by the way, Atheism Softball, I did 95% of this. Thank you very much. Okay. I'd like to point out again, 100 days. This is the official 100-day mark. Yay.
Oh, Jesus. I'm going to ask
Triple
you a
digits,
question.
people. Yeah.
I have a question, because if you've watched my channel, and we've discussed this before, and I've discussed this with you, you use the 100 days, which is from when he publicly said that he was going to pay everything and that you were going to see the books. I go from the April 16th deadline. Why not use the April 16th?
I would go before that till November 22nd, actually.
Actually,
a previous year.
Yeah.
But how far back do you want to go here? I mean, you've seen a lot of people, they've only seen what has been the courts put out yet, but you've seen a lot more of the actual emails and correspondence, so you know everything I've said is legit.
Yes.
And so how long have I been asking for the books going back to last year?
Oh, yeah. But the first time that I'm aware of now that they were promised, if I recall, was March 15th of this year. Was written, the documented promise to get them was by that point, so you could do your taxes.
Fair enough.
Gee, that's not like you want to do your taxes or nothing.
Weird, right? I mean, yeah, you're right. That was about March 15th, and I had specifically asked him, "Can I get a P&L? Can what's going on?" And what was the response? "Oh, my tax guy's taking care of all that. My CPA is taxing, doing all that." Well, that's not telling me anything. Can I actually see the records here? So. There you go. So I'm being like as generous as possible. So it's 100 days plus probably a couple hundred days or something. But anyway,
that's a generous number. I just find it amazing that people sit there and say that you're being hard on or whatever. I was like, I use a harder number than that. That's not a really tough number, and that's pretty bad. Now that's broken 100. That's just really wow.
I'm still waiting for Atheism Softball to do a video on this. He said he would have like several months ago. I explain to him, kind of the details. If he doesn't, that's fine too. But if he still wants to. But anyways, that's not the topic of discussion tonight. The topic of discussion tonight is going to be two people had messaged me recently today, as a matter of fact, and they said that Matt Dillahunty was talking about agnostic atheism again. Now, people know that I have a hard-on for this particular topic. I really just think the term itself has issues with it, and I've explained why logically and many times over. But my issue now is that going back a ways, you guys might remember, and I have the link in the video description, and I might be able to play the video here at some point, that Matt Dillahunty had actually said that agnostic atheism, in the weak case, which means that if you accept atheism as merely a lack of belief, is nonsensical. That is his position, or was at the time. This is something that I agree with him on, and that I think is nonsensical. This is something that Ozzy agrees on. Ozzy made a video on it. But then last Sunday, they told me, well, he's talking about agnostic atheism again as it somehow makes sense. And they're talking about how it relates to an epistemological proposition rather than a ontological position. And so I have that video, and I'm going to cue it up here in a few, or just play the transcript and read the transcript, depends on what you guys want. But it seems that he's kind of been very all over the place with this. And so I want to kind of go through this video or the transcript. I'll do the video, I guess. And see what you guys think. See what Nick thinks as a philosopher guy. What say you on that, Nick? I mean,
if you say it's an ontological position, that's an epistemological claim. So I'm really lost. If you're making an ontological claim, that's actually an epistemological claim on ontology.
Don't do that to me. Well, maybe. I mean, you could say that something has being without dealing with any kind of epistemic overtones of whether you know it exists or not. But I get what you're saying. But
yeah.
All right, so let me see if I can cue up this video here. No, wrong video. And then we're gonna go through a couple of different questions. And I was in the ACA today, the the Atheist Community of Austin. I was in their Facebook page and their Discord for like 4 hours. And on their Facebook page, it was kind of weird because the people that weren't answering my questions, they were like, "You're wrong. Your logic's wrong. You're wrong." I'm like, "Please explain to me why this is incorrect." And I got nothing but insults. Right. Then I go to the Discord for the ACA, where the mods know me, And one of the guys there was just tripping out. He's like, "Oh my God, I've been waiting so long to talk to you. This is great. I can't believe I'm having a discussion with you today." And we had amazing conversations for like 4 hours. So it's such a difference between the ACA Discord, where the moderators know me and respect, the things I have to say, as opposed to the Facebook group where they kind of know me, that don't give a shit whether my logic's right or not. All they want to do is just seem to pejoratively talk about me, and I'm not quite sure why that is. But all right, so let's watch this video real quick. Anything else you want to add before we start this? It was a kind of a quick intro. I did a Kyle intro, just quick and over.
Nope, it looks good.
Awesome. All right, so I queuing up the video. Then I got to figure out how to actually see it from the outside, so I'm gonna have to add it here. By the way, how's live chat doing? They all good? I'm drinking coffee right now, so really wired on that right now.
Chesh wants you to check your DMs.
Ooh, what did she send me?
If it's anything like my DMs from Chesh,
not much then.
Yeah, it's not. I keep asking, I keep hoping.
No. Yeah, no, I get it. It's like, please, once, no.
Yeah, no, I
don't know. She asked once, told me, she's like, "You're gonna pay me in dollars or Canadian money?" And I'm like, what are you asking me for, Chesh? Let's see here. No, where am I? Here we go. That's the video. So there we go. Let's kind of. By the way, you can actually see this still. I'm still screen sharing with you, right?
Yep. I see it just fine.
Right now,
I'm curious about what that bookmark is for donkey.
That's
what?
A whole different folder.
Okay, well, I lost it. Okay.
By the way, it's my imagination, and I'm never going to be pejorative with Matt, but is he looking really thin? Is that he's on a
I'm actually concerned. That's concerning. I haven't seen him in a while. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to speculate, but that's not what he looked like last time I saw him by any stretch of the imagination.
He does look gaunt, and I hope he's well.
Concerned.
Yeah, I definitely hope. I know he's under a lot of stress, but I do hope he's well.
That looks. I know that there's been stress, but that's not. That doesn't look like stress.
All right, so again, let me kind of give you a backstory on this. Once again, I have no ill will toward Matt at all. I think he makes statements that I don't think he could back up. I think he doesn't like the fact that I point out to atheists things that I find to be problematic, and I'm not the only one who does that. But for some reason, he's friends with like Ozzy, who has the exact same positions I have, and yet he'll talk to Ozzy about it, but he won't talk to me, and I don't really want to talk to him. But I still will point him out when I think that's something to point out, like this. And I don't want to check my DMs yet because it might have something weird in it. I will in a second here. All right, so see if you guys can actually hear this.
Aren't two things that are mutually.
Do you mean like you for sure know there is not a God,
no,
or you just?
I don't for sure know. I don't for sure know. I don't for sure know anything. I don't think there's a path to absolute certainty anywhere. Atheism, in its simplest form, could be viewed as non-theism. I am not convinced that a God exists.
Okay.
How is that dead?
Well, the idea. Again, just going back to so is that more like agnostic then? To say you don't know?
Well, agnostic and atheist aren't two things that are mutually exclusive. You can be an agnostic atheist because theism and atheism is about what you believe, and Gnosticism and agnosticism is about what you claim to know. So my position, no matter what you call it, is I am not convinced a God exists. And in some cases, depending on the God...
All right, well, let's stop there. So I'm going to break this down a little bit because he says a lot of different things in here. And let me run this by you, Nick.
Yeah.
Because he starts throwing in things like certainty and knowledge, and he even noticed, did you notice though, he actually said something interesting. He says atheism in what the simplest form, right? So he said atheism in its simplest form could be viewed as non-theism. Okay, there's some truism to that. However, if you go read a paper by Moser, he wrote a paper about atheism as well, and his simple atheism essay, he calls it simple atheism, is God does not exist. So when you talk about the simplistic form of atheism, I think, Matt, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. He's talking about the sensu lato. He's saying that in the most broadest understanding of the word, it relates to non-theism. Okay, I'll grant that. Okay. But then he starts talking about agnostic atheism, and he starts explaining that agnosticism deals with knowledge. Well, there's a problem here because this is an issue of equivocation more than anything else, because this is not how the word is normally understood in philosophy. And he's been explaining this. And he actually said it before. He has told people that agnostic atheism is nonsensical. If you don't have a belief, if you lack a belief either way, then you can't really epistemically modify it with any kind of epistemic modifier, like the word agnostic, if you're going to use that for a knowledge thing. But how many times have we told Matt or told people that agnostic isn't relating to knowledge? It is the position that you have no belief either way. I don't believe the proposition is true, and I don't believe the proposition is false. But he's trying to say here that it's normatively, or it comes across as normative, that agnosticism answers the questions about knowledge. But that's not the case. That is a true statement in 1% of the time at best. I'm being very gracious here. And so I see Matt trying to run this narrative where he's not wrong, but it's obfuscating a little bit. It's not actually telling people how it actually really is best understood. And so when in one video when he says, well, agnostic atheism in the weak case is nonsensical, and now it's like, oh, well, no, it's perfectly sensible. By the way, even the way he describes it, it's really not, which I'll get into. But benefit of the doubt, it has nothing to do with certainty, right? The God claim has, you could be an actual Gnostic atheist. You want to use that terminology, somebody who knows that God does not exist. Doesn't require certainty. Knowledge, it was called a belief, knowledge in the acceptance of the belief condition, weak belief condition, doesn't require certainty. It only requires belief to a certain degree that matches whatever theory of knowledge you're utilizing. Okay, but you don't have to be certain on it. So he's throwing all these things that I find to be muddying the water in a conversation. This is what I don't think he would ever have a conversation with me, because I would not let him muddy it like this.
Yeah.
So what do you think so far?
I think you make a lot of good points. He's definitely equivocating on terms. Now, you and I have had this discussion before. I do change the language I'm using based on my perception of how I'm going to be most effective in communicating my ideas to my audience. So I do change language that way, and I suspect that that's what he's doing. So under certain contexts, and I think we've had this discussion before with in regards to Richard Dawkins, who was in a debate, and somebody had asked him if he was an agnostic or an atheist. And he said, well, I'm an agnostic. And I said, well, wait a minute. We have you saying you're an atheist, a couple months ago. Sometimes you say you're an atheist. Sometimes you say an agnostic. He goes, well, it really depends on who I'm talking to and what's the understanding I want them to come away with from this. I'm aware that in some circumstances, atheist is a charged word, and it means one thing.
Bertrand Russell said the same thing.
Well, exactly. So,
by the way, your mic is,
Russell,
real quick before you continue, your mic is a little hollow. Is it? I mean, it's listenable, but it is sounding a little different than usual. Sounds a little hollow. Are you running any kind of audio filter or anything?
I am not, but I can think of a couple ideas. I can also switch to the wired one.
That was a little bit better, but
okay. I moved the boom a little closer to the boom. May have been off.
That's good, because it sounds like you're in an old 30s radio show.
Well, and Bertrand Russell actually, and he's a good example when I talk to, because when we talk about, again, Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, they do say that it's rare, but there are philosophers who use the lack theism. Bertrand Russell was one of them, but
he understood the difference.
He did understand the difference, and the other thing was, I don't think he was trying to talk to other philosophers. Now, admittedly, I don't think Matt Dillahunty is necessarily trying to either, but he is using the language of philosophy. And when you start trying to make a logical argument, I think you have a problem trying to make a logical argument using a layman's deck of words.
I agree.
So, and I think that's where I think, and that's so when it sounds like he's contradicting himself, I'm not sure he is, because I think he's talking to different audiences. But I do think it can be a problem, because it can be equivocation, especially if he's trying to engage in philosophical concepts and say this is how you can understand the philosophy, but refuses to use the terms in a philosophically accepted manner.
Well, you can't say in one video it's nonsensical and then later on say, oh, well, it makes sense in this case. Well, I mean, hang on. Now he's actually demonstrating my point of how much ambiguity is involved in this statement. The phrase agnostic atheist is ambiguous as hell. By the way, has anybody not noticed anything different about me besides Chesh and you? Is anybody? Like, really? Like, nobody?
Like I said, for me, it was just the first thing I noticed was your eyes are wide. Your eyes look very wide to me, but that's it. But okay,
wait. I'll do my Stanley Kubrick thing. because Stanley Kubrick has this thing where when somebody reaches the biggest point of maximal psychoticness, they're like, that's what.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty scary. Well, he's also using terminology when he says it's nonsensical. Actually, I'm not sure. Did he say it was nonsensical, or what was the term that he used? Because I thought he used.
No, he said nonsense. He said the quote
or not coherent.
No. He said that I am convinced that agnostic atheism is nonsensical. Is basically what he said. Okay.
Well, and I'm curious as to the grounds, but if the grounds is because it would be ostensibly the same as theistic. If you don't have a belief, you can't say that you don't have a belief as a theist. It's that joke I think I used before when the guy's trying to cross the border in Ireland during when the Protestants and the Catholics were blowing each other up, and the guy's trying to cross the border, and they say, well, are you Protestant or Catholic? And he said, well, I'm an atheist. Yeah, but are you a Protestant atheist or are you Catholic atheist?
Yeah, I remember that story.
Yeah. But the reason I like using that in this example, and on my end, it looks like the camera's frozen. I don't know if I'm definitely having some technical
You're frozen,
issues.
yeah.
I'm frozen, but okay, as long as everyone can hear me, I'll figure that out in a sec. But that's the same thing here with theist or atheist. If both positions are going to resolve to a lack of belief, the theist lack of belief position is the same as the atheist lack of belief.
Well, that's what I've always argued. Weak atheism and weak theism are the same position.
Exactly.
Now, a lot of people don't know how to wrap their head around that. They're like, that doesn't make any sense, Steve. You're crazy talk. Steve, you've lost your mind. You got contacts and your head exploded. But no, weak theism, weak atheism, agnosticism logically are all the same. I have a proof to actually demonstrate this. So as much as it really hurts the mind, they are the same position, logically speaking. But let me run through the questions. Like, we'll get some people asking questions on this about why I think Matt he just wavers on this consistently. I really wish he would just give a very specific thing about what his position is, because you can't say it's nonsensical. And all of a sudden, well, it makes sense here. So let me see if I asked some questions in the Facebook group, and I literally could not get a single person to answer this question. So maybe my audience, because it's much smarter, and it's not to trick anybody. It's basically, I'm just curious. Now, do you think I should maybe, you know what? I will put it in a notepad, so maybe that might be easier for people to see. How about that? That work? Oh, let me
all right.
That way I can bring it up. And then I gotta share this. Add. See what you guys, and maybe again, I might even go on a limb here and say that I might be wrong on this, only for the fact that I really only came up with this like today, so I haven't really had time to vet it. And if this is flawed, I'm perfectly willing to say, okay, maybe I'm wrong on this, because I have a blog on this, but I didn't get a chance to really vet this, so we'll see how it goes.
I have a couple of patrons now who are like, oh, we really want to learn logic, so I'm actually now teaching logic to a few of my patrons. We're going to start airing those, but I'm really actually enjoying that.
Is that predicate or propositional?
Is it predicate or proposition? Right now, it's just an introduction to logic. We haven't even gotten to I haven't done anything formal. That's not true. I've done some formal.
I would love to watch that sit in, help anything I can do. That'd be awesome.
Oh, please. Oh, I would absolutely love to. No, we haven't covered. We've started out with. We're starting from ground zero. Right. It's literally ground zero.
I could probably help a little bit. Okay, so the ex-Hindu atheist, $2. So if I say I am an atheist, so I have to prove it. No. I have something that I call the principle of rationality, which implies that a person that wants to have a conversation, they want to have a rational conversation. They want to be rational, which implies the principle of charity. So if Nick tells me he believes Santa exists, I'm going to believe that he believes Santa exists. I'm not going to argue with him on that. I think it's really ridiculous to be a contrarian and say, well, I'm going to not believe what you say you believe. No, I accept that as a belief and go from there as an honest agent, right? If I think that he's an honest agent, if he tells me he believes something, he believes it. I'm going to accept that by fiat, right? Why would you have to prove that? I mean, that's just, by the way, you couldn't prove it anyways. You can demonstrate it, but you really couldn't prove it per se. But no, you don't have to prove your beliefs. That's just
yeah. Well, with the exception of if somebody's saying you're arguing a precept, and they're saying that.
Don't go there.
I'm just saying. I won't. I'm just saying there are exceptions to what you just said. But for an honest interlocutor,
Yeah, exactly.
no,
Honest. Remember pre-supper? I don't think pre-suppers are honest, so that's the exception. So, all right, fair enough. Yeah, I don't think I've met any honest pre-suppers. Now, side 10, Bernicate, I think he's honest in the fact that he really does believe this. All right, but you got when I point out his errors, he just kind of shuts down. And S.J. Thomason had that happen the other day too. A quick diversionary story. Scott Clifton, who is from The Bold and the Beautiful and General Hospital, really nice guy. He happens to be really into philosophy. And I've known Scott for quite some time, and we talk about philosophy. And he had asked S.J. had asked, show me a contradiction in the Bible. He did. And it was a very simple contradiction. S.J. was hemming and hawing and trying to exegete it and come up with narratives. And I'm like, S.J., stop. He has given you an actual logical contradiction. And I showed her why it was a logical contradiction. I said, without adding more to the narrative or exegeting this, I don't see how you can deny, as written, it is a logical contradiction. Now, you can maybe say there's ways out of this by using some kind of semantic argument. You can add narrative, but that's not the question. The question was, show me a contradiction in the Bible. And he did.
What was the contradiction, if you don't mind
the contradiction was on the way home from I think the tomb. Did the people who's witnessed it, did they tell nobody about it, or did they tell somebody about it?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So it's either one or the other. Either you told somebody or you did not tell somebody. There's no other options in classical logic. But she was trying to really, really spin it, and I was like, SJ, stop. First address the contradiction that exists first, and then say it is written in there, and it is a contradiction as written. But let me try to explain it. That's different. I don't like that kind of apologetics, but at least it's better than saying this is not a contradiction. It's like, the hell it's not, SJ. And you know what happened after Scott and I pointed this out to her? What do you think? What do you think she did? And no, she didn't block me because she's a friend. But what do you think she did?
Yeah, I have no clue. I was going to guess.
I don't know. I haven't heard from her since.
Okay. That was okay. And it sounds like people are still thinking that the audio is getting worse. I'm going to switch headsets here, but
yeah,
it's going to take a minute.
But she just
keep
buggered
going.
off.
I'll catch up.
She just buggered off. So I don't know. Anyways, like I said, whether they're honest or not, I don't know. But I've never met an honest pre-supper. She made love to me. What's wrong with you? She's an attractive woman, but she's married, and crazy is, well, I would say crazy is not my thing, but okay. So,
yeah, there are exceptions.
There are exceptions. Yeah. Look who I've got a date with next month. Yes, I'm saying that again. I'm going to brag about that in perpetuity.
She ain't crazy. Sweet is not crazy. Okay, how's my mic now? Just before I quickly switch, if
it's good.
I mean,
much better.
Okay, you think it's good?
Yeah,
okay.
I think it sounds fine.
I'll leave it if anyone else has another. They were saying I should say danger, Will Robinson, danger.
Yeah. And not only am I going to brag about having a date, she wants to take massive amount of pictures just so everybody could be envious. That's my kind of gal. All right, so let's look at this real quick. And I want the live...
Okay, they're still getting a complaint. I'm curious. If I sound good to you, I'm wondering if...
Let me...
keep going. I'm going to switch. Hang on. If I sound good to you, I don't know.
Hang on. I will turn down... Maybe you're overdriving. I'm going to turn down your dB here on my end, and maybe that might help. So
I'll bet you that'll help. Oh, look at that! Even turning it down, I'm still in the red. There you go.
Yeah, you can see what I'm doing, huh?
Yeah, I can see it, and I was there. You go. That's perfect.
So you might have been clipping. So
the echo is real. Yeah, that should be significantly better. But I will switch if this doesn't do it for them. All
right, so let's do an audio check here. He shouldn't have any echo, and he shouldn't be clipping any longer. Yeah, I cut him down by 10.
It's getting better as we're doing it. It's getting better.
Right, I cut him down 10 dB, so perfect. Okay, there we go.
Okay.
Yeah. Got to find just like a woman, you got to find that sweet spot. Okay.
Everybody was blaming me, and of course, you're
a man. You should be blamed.
Well, no, when people blame you for this for anything, usually they're wrong. But in this case, I get to say, yep, it was Steve's fault.
Well, no, you know what? Pushback. No, you did have some. You did. Your mic did suck there for a second.
It did. That's true.
And then what happened is you fixed it, and then I had it correct for your old setting, and then when you fixed it, your audio went up, and then you started peaking. Don't mess with me, man.
Yep.
See,
okay.
Steve is never wrong. Accept this fact now. Okay.
Yeah.
I love when, you know, it's so funny too. I love when people say, Steve never admits he's wrong. And yet just recently, a couple times I was like, dude, I fucked up, but whatever.
Yeah.
It's bizarre. All right. So let's look at this. I want the outside chat to kind of help me along with these things for agnostic atheism. Okay. Cause I wanted to see logically, I had broke this down before in my blog, but I wanted to make it very simplistic and see if there is, some ambiguity here. Just if I broke it down very simplistically. What, it's still clipping? It shouldn't be clipping.
Well, they were saying it was. I think somebody was making fun of it, but I think clipping is bad. No, I think he's talking about something else. But and there's a lag too. But let's just no. The general consensus is I think it's okay. Maybe you're having problems.
I'll clip down the speakers a little bit here, but all right. But anyways, all right, so let's look through this. Okay, so to the people that don't know how to read this. P is a proposition, so God exists would be the proposition. It's essentially saying there's at least one God, okay? So to read this, number one, it is tilde, which is not, okay? So it'd be I do not know P. Basically, I do not know God exists. That would be read as I don't know whether God exists or not, okay? I don't have a knowledge claim towards God, okay? If I say I know God exists, I am making a knowledge claim. But I either know God exists or I do not know God exists. I am in the position, I do not know God exists. Nick, you would be in that position as well?
That is correct.
Okay. X out atheist. I don't care if God exists or not. When am I? Apatheist. I'm kind of thinking you're going to get me on that one.
Oh, that does. Yeah, I'd wanted to for the debate, but I'll bring that up in later because that'll come up with this. But yeah.
All right. So, and then the little caret would be and. So B, not P, would be believes P is false. So I believe God does not exist. So if I read that as a whole in a semantic sentence, it would be, I do not know God exists and I believe God does not exist. Okay. Now, I think, Nick, you would agree that that would be the position of a hard atheist, which we're just going to call atheist for right now, and somebody who just doesn't have any knowledge claim. This would be your typical atheist, right? Would you agree?
Well, I agree that this would be your typical atheist. Yes, I do think that a hard atheist sometimes. Oh yeah, believe not P. Yes, for hard atheists. Yes.
Okay, so in we're going to be in the scope of philosophy, not the ACA here. So,
okay.
All right. So in the scope of philosophy, this is somebody who's saying, I believe gods don't exist, but I'm not claiming that as a knowledge claim, logically speaking. Okay. So this would be agnostic atheist, would it not?
I'm sorry. Are you saying agnostic or agnostic?
Agnostic with an A.
Yes.
All right. I mean, so on the live chat, number one, how would you label that position? And again, I don't like these terms. I'm just showing you the ambiguity here. I would say though, if you're going to label this something, you're going to call this agnostic atheist. What else would you call it? I mean, I don't.
Well,
or atheist, just atheist.
Yeah, but this is why you had it because you had linked earlier that picture, and I thought the diagram did a very good job of explaining the difference. I mean, I don't think you can apply agnostic to atheist. You're not really supposed to apply. You can't compound the terms that way. They're separate terms.
One's ontological, one's epistemological, and I think that they should be made separate on a single landscape rather than a dual axial.
Well, an agnostic is it's not an agnostic is not a adjective in the sense you can't modify.
But they try. That's what they try to do. They try to use an epistemic modifier. Now we'll get into that. But so we all agree to number one. People use that term agnostic atheist for this position, which is superfluous because it's the same thing as saying an atheist in philosophy. Agreed?
But yes. So just to break it down, that's why the does not have knowledge of P is the agnostic part, and then the atheist part, which is already universally accepted, is the believe in not P.
Without having any knowledge claims to it. So if you just say in philosophy I'm an atheist, it's already normative that you're saying I'm not making a knowledge claim.
Yeah.
Okay. So that first one be agnostic atheist or just superfluous to be atheist. Number two, I do not believe I don't have knowledge of God exists. I'm not claiming knowledge, and I do not believe God exists. This would be the weak case of atheism. This would be the I don't believe case. This is the one that Matt Dillahunty thinks is nonsensical. I happen to agree with him. It is nonsensical because knowledge is a subset of belief. But let's assume that there is something to be had for this, some cognitive meaning to it. Again, the not KP would be agnostic, right? Because we've already determined from one that's agnostic, right?
Yep.
Okay. And if you're going to be using the weak definition of atheism, you would call that atheism, right? So number two would be agnostic atheist. I'm beginning to see a problem here, right? So one is called agnostic atheist. Two is called agnostic atheist. There's already some ambiguity here forming.
And in two, there's no difference between. I mean, once you say no belief in P, that entails no knowledge of P.
This is true, and that's a really good point, because it depends on how you want to look at this. It's either superfluous or nonsensical. It's nonsensical in the case that I believe that it's really weird to have an epistemic modifier for a non-dosastic position, but at the same time, if you allow that, okay, then it becomes superfluous, because as you said, if you do not believe P, you clearly don't have knowledge of P. It'd be weird to say, I do not believe Nick exists, but I know he doesn't. But I know he exists. Or do I know? Actually, I do not believe Nick.
But I know he. But I. Oh well, no. Okay, now you're confused. Okay,
hang on.
I don't believe he exists, and I don't know that he exists. They're both the same. So if you say once you say I don't believe he exists, that entails I don't know he exists. I don't know if he exists or not.
Right, because if you knew he exists, you'd believe it existed.
Yes.
Okay. So
exactly.
So either way you look at it, it's awkward, right? There's still some ambiguity there, but would you agree that the number two would still be agnostic atheist?
Yeah. So number two is identical to number one in terms of the terminology that's been set up here, and number two repeats the two are just
right. God's auditor points out the crux of this. The issue is, first case is agnostic strong atheist, second agnostic weak atheist. But since people use the term atheist differently, agnostic atheist would be both of these. If I say agnostic atheist, I don't know if you mean the strong or weak case. I don't know what you mean. It's ambiguous, which has been my whole argument. Thank you, God's auditor. Right now people are understanding what I mean by why it's ambiguous.
The strong and weak helps. He's right. Adding the strong and weak helps differentiate why people can think it's two separate things, but it's also the same. It's a clusterfuck.
Yeah. All right, now let's make it worse. Okay.
Oh, good.
And by the way, I have 12 different things that I've come up with, I think, to how ambiguous this would be. But let's talk about this with two different propositions, because this is where Matt Dillahunty comes in. Matt Dillahunty is trying to run the argument that it answers a different question. We're talking about the knowability of gods, which, by the way, is only barely how it's used in the literature at all. That's called the epistemological proposition of agnosticism. That's not normative. It's just not how it's used that much. Because when people say they're agnostic, I'm not talking about knowledge. I'm saying that I do not have a position of belief either way. It has nothing to do with the knowability of gods at that point. It's ontological. And I think it's disingenuous for Matt to try to convince people that agnosticism deals with knowledge in this case, because it simply doesn't. It's equivocating the term. Okay, so number three. If the propositions is P is God exists and Q is the gods are knowable, the knowability of gods, which is the epistemological proposition of agnosticism, then not KQ would be I do not know if gods are knowable or not, right? And I believe God does not exist. So that would basically be the position that I hold there are no gods, but I don't hold a position that you can't know if there's a God or not, right? Okay, nothing wrong with that. But again, what is that called? That would be called agnostic atheist. Well, what else would you call that? If you want to go the Matt Dillahunty route and go to, this is two different propositions, by the way, why would you ever slam two propositions like this together like that? I don't know. I don't understand why you're juxtaposing ontology with epistemology to begin with, but let's assume you do. I don't particularly like it. Other people that are in philosophy they don't care. Some do, some don't. Whatever. But what would you call position three then?
Well, yeah, I what would I call it by his language? I mean, I don't think. Oh boy,
it'd be called agnostic atheist, right?
I don't know that. Well, by how this is, yes. I mean, how he said it, we've just repeated. It's essentially the same claim. Although I want to find out if God's auditor is going to have another. I'm running on 3 hours of sleep, so I'm not going to be able to get really creative with this, but. If so, belief not P. So you've got the same.
Full Below Gaming says I tried to show Steve McRae videos to AXP and they threatened to ban me. By the way, what's funny is I swear to God, I was in the AXP Discord for like 4 hours a day. Those mods loved me because they all are philosophy guys. All the mods over there, they all know philosophy and they are dead on that I'm right. They're like, we know you're right, Steve, but what are you going to do, right? It's like, but we're going to have the discussion. And we talked for 4 hours. That's what I like about their Discord is they know that I have points to this stuff, and they're like, we understand Matt and Arn do their thing, but whatever, Steve. I'm like, okay, whatever.
God's auditor. I think 3 and 4 would be agnostic, gnosticism.
Okay, whatever. Agnostic inconsistentist.
Agnosticist. Agnostic inconsistentist.
It's politics. Yeah, thank you. It's politics. Okay, so let's go to number 4. So
here's the I think what he's trying to do is fit every single possible God claim into any claim in regards to God as a epistemological claim. I think he's trying to deny that it could even go into ontology.
Which is weird, because that's what we're talking. We want to know the ontological nature of God. I don't give a shit whether you think gods are knowable or not. I want to know if you believe God exists or not. That has been the great debate question for thousands of years. Why muddy the water with knowledge?
Is an ontological question.
Of course,
the existence of God is absolutely an ontological question, but it seems like this is it's just trying to force it into an epistemological one.
I can't stand that. I think it's wrong to do that. But let's look at 4 real quick. So we already agreed that not KQ would be agnostic as far as the epistemological proposition. The gods are knowable. I don't believe gods are knowable or not. I have no position on either way. If that was K tilde Q, that would be I know gods are knowable, or it would be interpreted as I have a belief that gods are knowable. Okay, there's different ways you can interpret this. This is why I came up with 12 different things. It could either mean I know gods are knowable, or it could mean I hold the position that gods are knowable. Okay, it depends on how you really want to interpret this type of structure. Okay, now if you want to read it like verbatim, it's I do not know gods are knowable or not, which I would interpret to be I don't know if the proposition of God's knowability is true or not. That's how I would personally infer from that. But we already agree that's agnostic in this case, and I do not believe gods exist. So you're basically saying again, I don't have the position that God exists, but I don't know either way, which again is what? Oh, agnostic atheist. So I've given 4 different logical things that all can apply to atheist, to agnostic atheist, showing this is why it's very vague, it's very imprecise, and it is logically demonstrable ambiguous. Because every one of these positions, if you translate it from logic into natural language, to me, becomes agnostic atheist. Unless I would be wrong. Yeah. Live chat, is any one of these that you would say would not be agnostic atheist if you translated it from logic to natural language? I'm just curious.
Well, I think the first proposition has to be agnostic in each of the cases. So the real question is there a single example where the second one would not be atheist? And since it's not BP or B not P in both of those cases, and both of those are atheist, I don't see a way to avoid agnostic atheist. Now, if you remove the not on the K, you can obviously that would change things dramatically, but as soon as you put in the not K, that's the agnostic.
All right, so
that's done.
Cajun Castration 666. If we're agnostic and like to mess with apologist, are we antanostic? Yes, we'll go with that. We love coining new words. So the first one would be, again, as God Ozer points out, agnostic, strong atheist, which is just deflationary to atheist. By the way, that's not a real word for that, but I like deflationary theories, and I just say it all deflates to be like I use it as reductionism, but agnostic strong atheist would be just agnostic atheist. There's no difference in that case, right? Because in philosophy, strong atheism is atheism. They're synonymous terms.
Yeah, the only difference is if you're starting to try to argue burden of proof, which again you wouldn't do in philosophy in this case, but I think that's why they try to differentiate it
they have different levels of burden of proof. I've already proven logically that weak and strong atheism have a burden of proof. It's just the degrees are different, and Richard Carey has agreed on, and Stephen Hoyt has agreed upon it. Dr. Zemer from Cal State Long Beach, head of the mathematics and logic department, he's agreed upon it. Dr. Malik agreed upon it. I am name dropping because this is a very solid, valid, logical argument that even weak atheists have a burden of proof in epistemology. When Matt says, "Oh, Steve's wrong on this," he never explains to anybody why I'm wrong on it. I don't think he even knows the argument. So he just does it by fiat that I have to be wrong, and it's very disingenuous when he does that. So But anyways, Nick, has anybody said anything other than 1 to 4 is not something that we say it is? I'm just kind of curious.
Not that
I've
I've seen. I've seen a lot of. I'm an anti-postist. Agnostic. We've got a lot of
people love their
answers,
labels.
But no, nobody's dealt with it.
All right, so let me ask my live chat. We got 166 people watching. If you agree that my argument that I have logically showed to a certain degree, I mean, there might be defeaters, whatever, but I've definitely made a pretty decent, strong, cogent argument that there are at least 4 different logical ways you can express the phrase agnostic atheism, which is ambiguous by that very nature. Logic itself normally can only be translated from logic to natural language one way. The other way, you can have many different ways. You can translate natural language into logic. You can really kind of, when you're trying to do natural language stuff, is really difficult. I have a hard time with it to predicate. But when you're taking logic and you're reading it, that can only be going this way one way, but it can go multiple ways this way. Does that make sense? I can take 2 sentences that are very similar, and they both logically distill down to the same logical syntax. But once I have that logical syntax, I can only read it one way.
I think that's generally accepted.
Generally.
I think there's some counterexamples,
Okay.
but for the most part, it's because of the difference in precision when you're trying to be when you're taking the reason we put these into logic is because they're naturally imprecise. And logic, it distills it to something that is far more precise and that we can work with and we know what we're doing. When you're going from imprecise to precise, many different things will fall into a more precise, a single more precise way of arguing.
I'll give you an example.
You go the other way around, it won't.
I'll give you an example, Nick. If I say I think P is true or I believe P is true, those both say the same thing. I predicate it with BP. So BP can only be read one way, right? Believes it's true.
Yes.
But I have 2 ways of, I mean, I could say I think it's true or I believe it's true. Those are natural language, but they're going to be predicated the same way in this particular case by one predication of belief. So
Yes.
If you have BP, you're not going to come out of that saying, well, I think P is true, because there are some nuances between think and believe. But natural language, you distill it down to a predication form. This is how I was learning to do it when I was figuring out how to. Now, because Ozzy, a long time ago, he gave me some great advice. He goes, Steve, people like the logic, don't get me wrong. But he says something to the effect that a lot of people don't understand it. And he's like, all you're going to do is confuse people. And he's like, just talk the natural language. So learn how to do this stuff, but learn also how to talk about the natural language. Now, I don't know logic that in depth. I know very basic logic, but I do understand logical concepts.
Yeah.
And so this is why I think that a lot of times it's easier to explain concepts than to, let's dive into this logic and explain how to do, like closing of trees, which hard I can do, but and how to proof check things. I have a natural proof checker that I use, and you can actually put in a premise and conclusion, and then you have to determine what rules of inference you use to get to that conclusion. It's really fun, but it's not easy.
Well, and doing that by hand just sucks. Going through, like, doing whole truth tables and doing the whole, oh my god, like
truth tables, use rules of inference. Oh man, it gets complicated really fast. So Roddy says, Steve, your position is valid and seems sound. Thank you very much. So far, I don't think I'm getting any really kickback or bad feedback here of that I'm necessarily wrong on any of this. So when I say that the agnostic atheist, when I keep telling atheist, you can use any term you want. You can say you're a square circle. But when you're talking to people that know a little about philosophy or theist, they're going to look in and go, this is iffy here. Why are you using these terminology? Oh, I'm a mathematician and you're saying that you're a square circle. Yeah, that's iffy. This is what I'm saying. I think that if atheists really want to up their game, they need to avoid these pitfalls by using such really ambiguous language just because it sounds cool to do so. Oh, I'm being really epistemically open-minded here, and I'm being rational as possible. I'm going to hold the position of agnostic atheist. You're not. You're not really being open-minded. What you're doing is being silly, I think, and thinking that it sounds cool. But when you really think about it, even Paul Draper in SCP, he points this out. He even says if people really thought about the term agnostic atheist, they probably wouldn't use it. He actually even says this in SCP in some regards. So anyways, I'm really high on caffeine. This is like Caffeine Corner.
I wanted to get I wanted to get the live chat, especially so I can see when I'm tagged in it, because I can't see on the back end when I'm tagged. I was like, oh, okay, Steve McCrae. That's who I'm looking for. Let's plug in so I can get the YouTube channel, and I could use a little more caffeine.
I'm screen sharing. You can see the chat.
Yeah, but I'm not. When I'm tagged, I can't see it. It doesn't highlight, and then I have to read. It's a lot harder. I want to see it so I can. It highlights if I'm tagged, because somebody tagged me like 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, it's highlight my name. Yeah, you're just seeing the highlighting of my name, right?
Well, I keep seeing the highlight of your name, so I was like, oh, somebody has something nice to say about. Oh, it's for Steve.
Yeah.
Yep. There was something I wanted to. Well, no, it's diving in. It's not. I think one problem that happens is, I think people think that you're trying to change their positions by trying to change the terminology. And first of all, I don't think you're trying to change the terminology. I think you're trying to use a more precise terminology. But regardless, you're not trying to change the positions. The positions are still not under assault. So, they can be if you change the justification requirements. But when I was arguing with Hernandez, I think his name was Hernandez. I think the last debate I did on Great Debate Community, I laid out for him my views, and he's like, "Well, wait a minute. You say you're an atheist." I said, "Yeah, I do." Well, that's agnostic. I was like, "Okay, fine. Call it agnostic. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. I say I'm an atheist because that helps me convey what it is I'm trying to say when I'm talking with laymen, and they get that position better, and they get, especially as an anti-theist, it makes much more sense if I don't go as an agnostic. But if by how you're constructing this logically, you want to say I'm closer to agnosticism, go ahead and say that. It doesn't change my position. And if you ask me to justify it, I can still justify it either way. It doesn't matter to me what labels you put onto it. And I think that there's a lot of people who take umbrage to this because they instinctively feel that you're changing their position, which is an odd. But I think that's where a lot of the pushback comes from.
Yeah, but there's two things. One, you understand the difference, and two, you're using it from a utilitarian point of view. You're saying that you're taking it has more utility for what you're using it for. And I'm okay with that argument. Matter of fact, that's the argument that genetically modified skeptic uses. I'm okay with that. It's not a bad argument. For example, I don't need that utility. So I'm not going to accept for me that utilitarian type approach it's not utilitarian, but utility. I'm not trying to talk to a specific audience in a way that I have any political agenda. I'm not an anti-theist, so I don't need that terminology. I can understand why people do. I get it. But at the same time, I'm not saying they're wrong to do so. The problem is they're saying I'm wrong when I don't do so. And that is the disconnect.
I think that's one of the disconnects, and that wasn't the one I was going to give.
I think that's a
bigger one. That's a bigger one than the one I was going to use. I think the other disconnect is because they are trying to conflate that, okay, we want to give you the tools for making a good argument. We want to give you the tools for how to even make anti-theistic arguments. Now let's do it in a way that's really agnosticism. And it's like, well, no, you're conflating. They're saying it's atheism, but it's closer to an agnostic position, or the claim that it can't be known. And I think that's where the burden of proof. If you're going to sit there and say someone doesn't, the agnostic is going to have a burden of justifying why they're agnostic, but the argument that I have no burden of proof is a much more agnostic kind of argument. I'm not the one who's making a knowledge claim. I still think it's not a defensible one, but it feels like that's where they're going. And I think you can only do that if you equivocate on the terminology, which is what I think they're trying to get the best of both worlds with none of the downsides of either.
Well, I think they do as well. But I think they do that for their show. But God's Otter says for $2, finish your bottle, Johnny. I'm 3 ahead of you. I've still got about that much left, and I want to screen share something real quick. I want to point out something. Like this, when somebody's in like the live chat starts, instead of actually looking at the argument, but starts making things very pejorative and personal. I don't know why you bother having a conversation with them, right? And it's just like somebody says, and I don't know who it is, and they'll be gone in a second, but they say you're high on caffeine and your own sense of self-righteousness. At that point, you've accused yourself from the conversation Because if you don't have the articulation and the understanding and the intelligence to have a dialogue with somebody on an intellectual level, would you have to resort to a pejorative of that nature to degrade them to their character and their intellectual capacity to have conversations of this level with an actual philosopher? You've thus exposed yourself as somebody who's not worthy to even be in my live chat. So yes, call that self-righteousness, but you can kiss my ass.
Well, and let's assume he's self-righteous.
Yeah,
let's assume he's self-righteous. Let's absolutely assume he's self-righteous. Does that mean he's wrong? Does that suggest he's wrong? Does that mean anything is wrong with the argument?
By the way, that's a big word, self-righteous, and I don't think they use correctly, but whatever. I'm tired of it. It's just like it's a waste of my time for people to be so demeaning towards somebody just because they don't understand the argument or don't know how to formulate a counter to the argument. I think it's very telling, and I think that as a community, we need to start exercising a little more prudence in having people around that are just not capable of having discussions. Because if not, you end up with essence of thoughts. You really do.
And that's been a new experience for me, because this is the first time I've had a channel that's actually gotten any, like, people are actually following it and engaging with it, and there's a level of trolling that comes, and it's funny because I think it's harder. I've never judged harshly people who reach the conclusions that you just reached, but part of me is like, well, look, what does it hurt to let them? It's like, now I'm on the other side of it.
Yeah.
Like, no, because it takes the oxygen out of the room. It takes the oxygen out of the room.
If you spend your time wasting on trolls, you're never going to get to the discussions you want to have. It's just not worth it. And I'm sorry, this is the internet. That's how it works. But Kitty asked me a question, and I apologize, Kitty. I don't know what your question is. She says, same question to Steve McRae, and I don't know what the question is, and I'm trying to find it.
Wait, hold on. I just saw it a second ago.
By the way, hi, Kitty.
Where you can see her. There. Okay. Scroll up like 2, and then right there. Hold on, I saw it. Or I can scroll up and.
Yeah. What question am I looking at? I'm really apologize, Kitty.
I swear, seeing essence of thought, essence of hots. Okay, I don't think that was it.
Maybe she could just ask again.
Okay, I saw it a second, then you scrolled up just a little
Somebody says, just to derail the discussion, how to go raid on the Area 51. I guess like 100 people showed, but nobody crossed the line. Two people got arrested, and I think one person got a citation or something. But yeah, it was nothing. What do they think they're going to do? A Narada run? Come on. Narada. But what she says, is it really needed to be more precise when in common lexicon, agnostic atheist is widely used? But what does it mean by being widely used? This is the whole thing, Kitty. I've shown it's so ambiguous where all it does is like saying, I'm a square circle. Okay, well, what do you mean by that? Well, I'm a square and I'm a circle. Okay, but what do you mean by that? It doesn't have any real cognitive meaning to it. It's an object that cannot exist, right? So if I say that square circles like Nick, what am I? That's a grammatically correct sentence, but does it have any real cognitive meaning to it? Here I have an object that can exist, that has some kind of disposition towards Nick. It's just nonsensical. So I'm explaining to people that, sure, you can call yourself an agnostic atheist, but what the hell do you mean by that? Because I've got 12 different things it can mean. It doesn't tell me anything about your actual positions. It's just, gobbledygook, I think.
I'm going to take a slightly different position. For the most part, I agree. I think in common parlance, okay, human beings almost never say what we mean. We just hardly ever say what we mean. And Steve talks about negation raising a lot, where we say one thing and really it's interpreted as something else because it means something else. But we're usually very imprecise with language. And I think that's fine. That's something that I've actually always struggled with, because if my wife says, hey, would you take the girls upstairs, or no, would you mind taking the girls upstairs?
That's a directive. That's a directive. That's not a question. That's a directive from my wife.
But I answer it as a question. So I say no, which of course means yes, I'll do it, because I'm answering what she asked, not what she meant. So
we call that being a dick.
They do. That's why I had to go through so many girlfriends before I found one who just gets the fact.
Yeah.
But I'm the son of a lawyer, So I learned language to learn to, and that's one reason why I was so attracted to philosophy and got involved in it, because I learned to be as precise as possible, including to say what I mean.
I will give you a pushback on that. I don't think you're being precise by doing that. I think that your pushback is in place because in language, we have locutionary force, and we have an understanding that what our locution is, it's not necessarily what we're trying to relate as a social compact with each other. So if I ask you, Nick, hey, what time is it? Or excuse me, do you have the time? And you say, I do, and you wander off. Yeah, I think
exactly.
You're a dick,
So
right?
I agree with you. Which is why I've given this example 3 or 4 times, and I said, I have to come up with a better example because everybody I've given it to says, oh, that makes sense, but Steve's gonna fucking catch the problem.
Yeah.
I know there's another example out there that's better, but you're right. You're absolutely right, because nonetheless, if I know what is meant, regardless of how it's said, then yeah, you're being a dick when you do it. Okay, thanks for destroying my example. I'm sure there are better examples out there, but everybody else got the example except for Steve that had to analyze it to death and point out the flaw. That's why it's an example and not the reality. At any rate, I think that you don't need that level of precision when talking every day to people, and you can say agnostic, atheist, and if you're reasonably aware that they're speaking the same language, that the words mean, that the metaphors all mean the same thing to them that they do to you, it's perfectly okay. But if you have a program where ostensibly you're trying to educate people on these, I think there's a higher bar of accuracy and precision that needs to be maintained. So I don't necessarily mind when someone goes agnostic, atheist. And I think that when somebody says agnostic, atheist, and it's just on the street, going up to them and saying, well, that doesn't mean anything, right? That's being a dick. Does that... I don't think so. I'm just gonna. I don't think it's being a dick at all. I'm gonna ask what they mean by it. But Kitty says, meaning I do not believe in God and I don't claim to know gods. Okay, then that position is called. There's a term for that. It's called non-theist. Why not just say you're non-theist? What you just, again, deflationary or reductionist. I'm going to say this. The easiest way to describe what you said in one word: non-theist. Because if you say you're non-theist, you basically have said everything you just said in one word. I think the general population would be unable to distinguish between non-theist and atheist.
I agree, but that's because of groups like the ACA who conflate them, who think that they're the same thing, and they're not. Well, atheism and non-theism are not synonymous.
But that's why, so for a group like them, I agree the bar has to be higher, and there has to be pushback when they don't use the higher bar, especially if they're cutting corners in order to make their lives easier in one way or another, especially when it's not even necessary, really, because there are ways to accomplish all these things. I think they're cutting corners.
Maybe.
I don't mind when people do it. Well, if you're cutting the corner in order to enable a lacktheism defense, I think that's, you're just kind of playing games to make your life easier. And
they play hide the ball. Let me show people this real quick. You can see this pretty clearly. Now, people may recognize this. This is actually Dr. Alex Malpass's view too on the use of reason. This is the view that I hold, right? And so this is the when I say that I'm agnostic, I'm using it as this view. So this schema is logically valid. It's sound. When somebody tells me, agnostic's not the middle position, I automatically know that they really don't have a clue. Because it is the middle position. It is quite literally, in this regard, in this schema, which is normative in philosophy, between the belief position of God does not exist and the belief position that God does exist. It is in between, the not positions. Okay? So Matt knows this. I mean, Matt's aware of this. So when he says agnostic atheist, what he's trying to say is that anybody on this side here would be agnostic atheist. But at the same time, that's a problem because the agnostic is separate from the atheist here. These are not compatible. They are mutually exclusive positions. This is the position that holds to both of these, not just this. Okay, so this position here for an atheist in philosophy holds the proposition to be false. The agnostic does not hold that position. This is mutually exclusive from this mutually exclusive from this, and this, I don't know if they can see my mouse. Can they? You can, but I don't think they can.
They can.
Okay, so the agnostic is mutually exclusive from the theist, mutually exclusive from the agnostic, and the atheist is called a contradictory from the theist. These are called contradictories, meaning that if the atheism is right, theism is wrong or false. If theism is true, atheism must be false. They both cannot be true, and they both cannot be false. This is why they have that kind of relationship. They're not dichotomous. You don't have to be either one. You can be other. People, when anybody who tells you in philosophy you must be theist or an atheist, walk away. They don't know shit from Shinola. That's just so wrong. It's fundamentally flawed. If they don't have what I would consider what's called first principles, then they're really not telling you anything of value. But anyways.
Well, I think that comes from the notion. I mean, at a minimum, at least they're not saying atheist is lack of in the same sense of morals, and what they're acknowledging is that atheist is the negation of. But they're saying that you can only either have the affirmation or the negation of a proposition, and no, because you can
withhold
on the proposition,
right.
And if they don't acknowledge that, and if they're trying to force you into one position or another,
the dichotomy is believes P is true or does not believe P is true. And what the ACA does is say, well, if you hold the do not position, you're everybody else. And that's what they're trying to do. They try to label that as atheist, and so they include more people. It's a dishonest approach. It is the same approach that American atheists use. It is politically motivated, and it goes back to 1972 with Flu's paper on atheism.
That's right.
Presumption of atheism. This is what he was arguing for. Now, there's been many good arguments against his paper. I find it to be a very not a poorly written paper, I guess, but poorly argued paper. I don't think he makes his case by any stretch of imagination. But when people start saying things like along the lines of you must be by necessity either atheist or theist, they're not telling you the truth. It's just wrong. Now, if they say, well, within the American atheist ways of looking at it, you have to be either one or the other. That's true. I'm not American atheist. I'm not part of their organization. I'm not part of the ACA. I'm not obligated to hold to their weird schema, which is atypical and very stipulative. And so if you want to be part of that schema and you want to be way different from how actual philosophers use it, be my guest. You're more than welcome to. This is why I really get upset when Matt Dillahunty has gone around verbally saying and in writing saying that I'm a prescriptivist. I'm not. I don't prescribe any of this, right? I'm just giving people information and then making sure they have informed choices. I don't say you have to use one usage or the other. This is the difference between them and me. They're saying you must use this usage. If you do not believe in God, you are an atheist, period. David Silverman says the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So they're the prescriptivist, and they're projecting that on me.
Which is prescriptive. And it strikes me a little bit, it's forced teaming, and it is this notion of, it's a bit like it's a loaded statement. Because what they're trying to say is it reminds me a bit, this is a poor example, but off the cuff, it's the best I can do. Do you still beat your wife? That question, the way it's phrased, you must accede to answer that. You must grant certain points you may not wish to grant. And if the position is you must either believe in God or believe there is no God, you must assume one of those two positions. You're forcing someone into a false dichotomy that they don't necessarily. Well, the dichotomy is true.
The dichotomy is true, but you're giving them a schema that they must hold to.
Yeah, the fact that you must choose that dichotomy is its own false dichotomy.
Right,
you don't have to choose.
Well, that's meta, but that's true. Yeah, I get exactly what you're saying. It's very meta. But what he's trying to say there's something called a fallacy of ambiguity. And there's many different types of fallacy of ambiguity, one of which is called the complex question fallacy. The complex question fallacy is, like Nick said, have you stopped beating your wife? Now, that is answerable. The correct answer to say would be no. And the reason being is there is obviously an unsupported premise, a hidden premise there that is by guilt by implication, or implicature, that's saying by granting
logically the correct answer is no. Yeah.
Logically, the correct answer is no, because I never started beating my wife. I'm not married, right? Or worse, there's what's called an infelicity in logic, where if I ask you a question where a proposition doesn't have any real cognitive meaning to it, because only for the fact if I say, what's the name of the current king of France? Well, it's a nonsensical question. There is no king of France. So hey Nick, what's the king of America? So there's an infelicity to be had there that goes into Russell's and some other people's of what that actually would mean to have that kind of infelicity in a proposition. But if I ask you, did you stop beating your wife? Logically, yeah, you say no. But there is that hidden premise. Now, I ran into this problem just recently, and I had somebody come on Twitter, and they were trying to run a narrative, right, by implicature. I'm not saying that you are this, but blah, 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 right?
Oh, yes. I remember this discussion.
Right. So that'd be like me saying, hey, Nick, you know, dude, I know that you don't beat your wife, but if you did, well, no, it'd be like, hey, Nick, I'm trying to think of a good way. I don't have any evidence that you beat your wife, Nick, but you know what? There's a possibility that you did. And so because there's a possibility you did, I'm going to withhold judgment that you beat your wife because I don't know either way. And so there's
which is technically true.
It's all true. All true.
It is such a loaded way because nobody would say that. We already know in common language nobody would say that unless there was some cause for making the claim, because the claim is assumed in all other circumstances. So if the claim has to be said, you are implying there's a reason to say it.
There's a presupposition there. Like simple, hey, Nick, you know, is your brother still in the army? It presupposes that your brother exists. It presupposes that he's in the army. These are presuppositions.
Here's another way to do it. Steve, Steve, I still come on this show because you and I are friends, and I believe you're innocent until proven guilty.
Gee, thank you. Yeah. The problem I have with this implicature is that it implies there's something to be guilty about.
Well, and it implies that everything I just said is completely true, obviously.
True, but yet there has to be a reason why.
It's loaded, because I would never say it's so true. It is so universally true. I don't say that on every show I go on. Yeah. I don't sit there and when I'm on modern day debates, you know, James, I like coming on this show, and I'm willing to still do it because I believe you're innocent until proven.
But the only way you would say that is if I had charges against me. Now it gives you reason to, right?
I wouldn't say it unless, exactly. So there's that implication.
There's been two people who have done this recently to me, and I will. One of them is Tom Jump, who I'm happy to call out because I'm sorry, but Tom, dude, give it up, dude. You just bad at all this. Please don't write a book. It'll be up there with on the Dr. Seuss level. I mean, Tom Jump's epistemology consists of this: you're wrong, you don't understand. Pull your head out of your ass. He doesn't get any of this. He just doesn't. But he doesn't understand guilt by implication, which is a complex question fallacy. He's trying to say, well, hey, Steve, I'm going to give you the same innocence, no proven guilty as anybody else. I'm like, of what?
Yeah.
I'm not the one being sued. So, and then I had another person do the same thing with this whole rape apologist nonsense crap, right? It's like, they're like, well, I'm not saying that you are a rape apologist, and I'm not saying that you do rape apology, but in these cases, you're a rape apologist. Like, it doesn't fucking work that way, So whatever.
Ocean had a great one with the pumpkin thing. What was the minister that the pumpkin thing was for? He was the
that was
minister.
The fundamental national Baptist. International Baptist, I think it is.
Yes, but there was I forget the name of the minister.
Stephen Anderson
runs it.
And what's the other guy? Oh my God, Mike or something or other.
Peterson? I thought there was
somebody in live chat can tell me.
So he goes, well, I'm not saying that he's sexually attracted to pumpkins.
Yeah.
I'm just saying we should ask him.
Yeah, same thing. Same thing. Hey, Nick, I don't know if you're a kitty diddler, but I think we should ask. Let's
just ask. I'm just asking.
These words have implications to them. This is why we have the loaded question thing. This is why we have complex question fallacy. Yeah. And so when Tom Jump says something like, "Well, Steve, I assume that you're innocent until proven guilty," and all this stuff, of what?
Thanks. I can understand.
I have nothing to be.
That would really get.
Nobody's charged me with anything. There's not a single lawyer out there that said I've done anything wrong, because I haven't. And after everything's said and done, I will release so much shit. But there's been nothing that I did from day one that was illegal, unethical of any sorts. People lied, go figure. And yet it's so funny is people will try to latch on to the most myopic things that they think they could spin into a narrative, and they ignore all the bigger picture shit that's already been established. Let's think about that.
Let's answer. Wait, Hellbound Heathen. What's wrong with being sexually attracted to squash?
Nothing. I don't judge, dude.
Absolutely nothing, of course. And I have for a long time felt that. Oh, that was like a general.
Yeah.
She wasn't talking to me.
Dude, you can have squash love.
Yeah, squash love is fine.
Yeah. Well, hey, you know what? I tell you what. Cheshire has started a thing now. She will stomp Cheetos with her feet and send you the powder for a nominal amount of fee, or I don't know what she charges. It might be expensive.
For nominal, yeah.
But I think she might do squashes too now.
She charges $5.95.
Okay.
Plus shipping.
It's reasonable.
Don't ask how I know that. I'm just saying.
Yeah, you have Hulk smash. It's Squisher. It's Cheshire squash.
Cheshire squash.
Yeah. In this case, literally. But you guys see the point on this? I'm clipping when I yell. Sorry. But do you guys see my point? Is that when you have dishonest people like Tom Jump and all these people coming out of the woodwork to try to run this narrative that I'm a rape apologist, they do so dishonestly because they're trying to run a narrative by using fallacies such as complex question fallacy or guilty by implication. And most of us recognize this shit. People have been blasting these people, but they're too stupid to understand this concept. I literally was showing Tom Jump doing exactly what he was doing to me back to him, and he wasn't getting it. And some people would jump in going, why are you saying this about Tom Jump? I'm going, read the whole thing. Like,
why are you saying this?
I get it now, Steve.
He gets loads of defenders, and he does it to you. And
But you know what? After everyone that came that he tagged this whole list of people to come dogpile. The people that showed up goes, "Oh, Steve, why are you accusing of this? What evidence do you have of this?" I'm like, read this. And they're, okay. He looked like an idiot.
He tagged me in. I like him. You know what? I think he's a good guy. I do like him. But I'm sitting there going, I'm sorry. I am going to have to agree with Steve on this one. I think there's a problem with how this has been framed. And it was, I think that was.
Well, here's the thing. Anybody in their right minds to think I'm a rape apologist has got to be something's not right upstairs. They're just. I have noticed that the 5 or 6 people running that narrative are all from the same troll group that I and Reds left years ago. Why is that? Why is it literally that same group? Because it's all a personal vendetta. Because clearly I don't support rape, not by any stretch of the imagination. This goes back to EOT trying to say that if you don't agree with him, you're a violent transphobe. I'm a violent transphobe. Rachel Oates is a violent transphobe. Sarah Michelle is a violent transphobe. These are the words that people use because they think it has power to them. It lends to a narrative. It lends to, I don't have an argument against what you're saying. Therefore, I am going to try to diminish your character. And that's what we as a community need to start pointing out. And I'm grateful that there are people that are willing to do it now. I know Red's Reddick has stepped up to the plate. Cheshire has stepped up to the plate. There's a whole bunch of other people on Twitter saying enough. We are tired of this. We're tired of Essence of Thought doing it. We're tired of people like Cliff Jumper doing it and XXX Live It, whatever the hell her name is. And who's it? Fiona and a whole bunch of other people that have been doing this. People are tired of it. Character assassination is so 10 years ago, right? We have moved on. We've moved on to having actual dialogues.
Well, in these terms, they're deliberately equivocating on these terms in order to, the idea that you could be a rape apologist because of charges levied against someone else when you did not apologize for that person, you didn't sit there and say anything was okay. Apples and oranges.
What's
okay, yeah.
What's that going to do? Cheshire, we will cover this more on Monday. I promise you. Cheshire and I have a show as well.
I'm livid. I am livid at Chesh right now. I am utterly livid. I haven't a clue. I'm just clearly she's figured out I'm mad at her, and I'm sure she did something. I haven't figured out what it is yet.
I'm not saying she's done something wrong, but until I have evidence, until I have evidence she hasn't done anything wrong, I'm going to reserve judgment. Yeah.
Okay, good. She'll fight you.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good idea, Chesh. Fight the guy with the lots of gray hair instead of the guy with some gray hair.
I gotta tell you, although I love Ask a Philosopher, don't get me wrong, I do think that Caffeine Corner might be as big as Non Sequitur Show one day. It's possible.
You guys do well. You guys do very well with that.
I don't know what it is. I mesh with her really well on that show.
And Ask a Philosopher is a very different. I love Ask a Philosopher. I love doing this. It's a different audience and it's a different group of people. It's a different. Coffee Corner, I think, is a show that's working. It's really working well.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because people were like, one person was like, "Oh, this is drama." It's not. It's just this is stuff that's going on in the community. I think it's important. I think it is important to address community concerns before they get too out of hand. And I think Cheshire and I do a very wonderful job with that. We enjoy it. We love people tuning in for that. And it's been popular. Even Anti-Ordinary likes it. Come on. She's not a big fan of mine, although she's kind of grown. I've grown on her. But, She loves it, so hey.
Well, there's a fungicide. AO, there's a fungicide for that, and I'll hook you up. But Steve's looking like okay.
Well, I'm squinting because again, it's kind of hard for me to read a little bit with context. I'm still getting used to this prescription.
Oh yeah.
So I'm just squinting to kind of read the live chat.
Well, I mean, listen, I publish a lot of papers on different things. You don't always agree with them. I don't always agree with everything that, everybody says on Caffeine Corner, but it's fair. It's still, and it's not said for the drama of it.
Mm-hmm.
You guys sit there and you say, this is our breakdown on what's going on. And I don't think anyone on any side could accuse it of being unfair or biased. It's just, and it's usually a very reasonable, breakdown of what's going on. If it was for drama, I think there are ways to squeeze more drama.
And by the way, we will have Jess comes on this every so often. She does act as a good in between for kind of a lay thing. And we'll get back to the topic at hand soon. But we're all over the place sometimes. Steve McRae is being guilty of being dead sexy. Oh well, thank you.
She's and we had this discussion before, which I think she does. Yeah, she does a very good job when she's here, which is I think the show gets better too. So that works out. I'm still mad at her for something.
Yeah, well, she's guilty of something. Probably, maybe it's possible. And I'm withholding judgment.
I know she's guilty. I know she's guilty of something because everybody's guilty of
something.
Teach him
not understand.
Whatever she's guilty of is terrible.
How does he not get?
Probably involves puppies.
How does T-Jump not understand that his argument's so bad? I don't get. It's just so basic to us. Yet he thinks he's making a very rational argument. I'm withholding judgment that you've done something wrong, even though I've not been accused of doing anything wrong in any sense of the word, except for people that don't know what the fuck they're talking about, that have not looked at anything, right? So, anyways.
Well, people, people, yeah.
All right, so let's open this up. We are getting to the 90-minute mark, close to it. So, I'm a bit sick today. Steve is actually being nice to me. This is true. I told her on the last show I did with her this morning, this afternoon on Dino's channel, that I was going to be nice to her today because she's not feeling well. The 24-hour thing. Chesh, I got to be nice to her.
Oh, okay, Chesh.
So I can't. Okay, see, this is weird. When it comes to girls, there's something. Ever heard the term negging?
Negging sounds familiar.
Negging is a pickup artist line where negging would be you kind of give somebody a backwards compliment to try to lower their self-esteem to make them more susceptible to your advances, right?
Okay.
Now, I unwittingly, I think, may have done this in my past when I was dating, but I didn't mean it to be negging. When I was thinking of it is I'm shy around women, and I don't want them to think that I'm hitting on them directly, and so I'd kind of give a backward compliment. To kind of be self-defense mechanism. I'm in tune with myself. I may have come across as negging, and maybe it was an asshole. I don't know. I'm not saying that I've done perfect thing in the dating things. I haven't. We're men. Men do stupid shit. Ask any woman about. Ask any man who's ever dated a man. Men do stupid shit. We admit. We're well aware of this. But I will not give her any backwards compliments or anything like that. Everything I will say for today will be very pleasant to Chesh. And I'm very grateful that she's come on to the community, that I've discovered her, buried in Twitter somewhere, and got her to finally come on camera and talk to people. And I think it's been beneficial to the community as a whole. And God, she just have beautiful, nice, big, huge, round eyes.
Which we got to see when the camera cut. She showed us her eyes during the rum and coke night.
I have seen her eyes, and they are spectacular.
Yeah. We got a really good question that I liked. Why does the diagram that we had up earlier show epistemology and ontology on the same level?
Very good question. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't. It doesn't. It does in the extremes. Okay. If you look on the diagram, and you look on the far ends, then you start dealing with epistemology, which is not necessarily the epistemological question of God's existence, but it deals with, do I know God exists or not? Because again, there's two factors that you have to run into here dealing with these types of terms. One, are you saying that you know God exists or you don't know God exists? Or are you talking about the entirely different proposition of the knowability of gods? Those are two very different things. So if I'm using the terms like agnostic or gnostic for as an epistemic modifier, am I using it as I know God exists rather than just believe? Or am I using it as a different proposition altogether relating to a different question, as Matt Dillahunty always tries to say? Well, it answers a different question. If that's the uses that he's using, it's just as ambiguous.
I think he may have meant not the not KP, or I think he meant the although maybe this is what you're describing. The last one that you did, the chart that had on the left. Okay, yeah.
The further you go to the extremes, you get to KP, right? I know P. I know God exists for theist, but that's not certainty. Again, you don't have to have certainty to have knowledge. And so when you start moving that from the middle towards one of the poles, once you reach a certain level, you can say, I know this to be the case if you can meet certain conditions. And usually it's a tripartite considers conditions for justified true belief, which is P is true, I believe P is true, and that you're justified to believe P is true. Now, granted, that is just one theory. There's other theories of knowledge out there. So, does that answer your question? Sort of?
We'll see. I'm sure we'll get a reply to that in a second. What part?
So Nick, when I say like KP, how would you infer to that? Because there are different ways of looking at it. I mean, it is I know P normally. I know that P is true, right?
Yes, that's how it. Yes.
Yes.
KP. Yes.
That's your predication for it. But what Matt Dillahunty is trying to do is he's trying to say that would be epistemologically the proposition of the knowability of gods, I think. And so he's saying that, I'm agnostic, meaning that I don't know gods exist or not. That's not how we use these terms in philosophy very often. So I don't know how he's I don't know how he's trying to tell people that agnostic is about answering a different question, because as you can tell by that diagram, it's not. It is the position of in between agnostic and theist. Atheist and theist.
I think he's trying to put it back into this idea that it's a belief state. So it's not a proposition; it's a belief state. And as a belief state, it doesn't. Let me think about this for a second. So if he's saying, when I claim to, oh God, no, I'm probably too tired to work this out.
That's okay. A couple things. Salazar says, for an uneducated peasant moron like I am, I do like when Steve goes philosophy nerd and breaks stuff down, new data for me. And I appreciate that, because I was in Discord and I literally had somebody just say something similar to that. He's like, look, I don't know anything about this stuff, but I've been wanting to learn. I'm a new atheist, and all I've heard is the ACA, but I've heard you talk about some other stuff, and I've heard pros and cons. I heard the people that I trust telling me, hey, Steve knows his shit a little bit about this. And I have other people saying, Steve's an idiot. Okay. He wanted to decide for himself. We talked for hours, and he was like, I was thrilled to talk to you.
Well, and there's nothing that Steve said. I mean, if you look up Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, there's very little he's saying that isn't in the first page of the definition of atheism. And in the Encyclopedia of Philosophy, by the way, it also says it's not being prescriptive. Mm-hmm. These are how it's generally used in philosophy. There are philosophers who have used it differently. In general, there's a lot of pushback against that for the following reasons. But it can be used that way. This is why we at the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy don't think it should be, but this is what we're describing how.
Which is great. And by the way, but Nick,
he's never denied that. How
many people have said, and I love this, when they say, Steve quotes this, but he never reads any further. I'm like,
everything I just said.
I'm like, are you really serious? You really think that I haven't read further in this? I don't discount the rest of what it says, but you have to understand it in context. Like, for example, SEP, and not just SEP, I read IEP and I read papers. But when SEP says, this is how it's normally used, but for the rest of this, we're going to use it as the epistemological proposition, great, no problem. But when people say, oh, this is how it's used throughout philosophy because they're only using it in the last portion of the article, which is the paper that Draper wrote, that's disingenuous, because Draper's not using it as normative. He's actually explicitly using it very differently to try to make a few points and say, this is how other people are using it. This is the epistemological proposition for it. Let's talk about that. That's perfectly fine. But to say that I haven't read it, it's just asinine.
Yeah. I'll tell you the other thing. And I've told this story a couple times, and I like this story, which is I first met you when I was on the non-sec to discuss prison reform, because I had actually written a book on it, and that had nothing to do with philosophy. But Kyle was just like, oh, you're going to like this guy. He's a philosopher. You're going to love him. And then you said, listen, Nick, I've written this stuff. Would you take a look at it? And I remember, too, I was very busy, but I was like, yeah, I'll take a look at it. I looked at it. I was just like, well, there's no big deal here. I don't understand what the biggie is. So I'm looking.
I didn't
at
say it was
and I see-
revolutionary.
Well, no, well, see, why you having me look at this? I thought there's nothing.
I didn't
here
say I was
that's
writing a novel
particularly
back then.
Controversial.
Yeah.
And then you got into a thing with Carrier. And then I love that one too, because I said, okay, guys, let me break down everybody's argument. I broke down the arguments, and I was like, so basically, you're both right. It's just from a different. And then Carrier was like, you see, Steve, he just said I'm right. Why are you?
Yeah.
Like, well, that's not really. It's like, you see, Nick gets
That's
it.
Carrier.
It's like, wait a
That's
minute.
Carrier. That's Carrier, though. I swear to God, Carrier. Carrier. He's a weird interlocutor. I like Carrier. I consider him a friend, but let's be realistic. He likes his rhetoric. He really does.
So I want to, because I love this story, because what ended up happening was Steve. I saw Steve get into a Twitter argument, and somebody said, "You're telling us how to use it." He's like, "I'm not. I'm not." I was just like, "Okay." I call bullshit on this guy. It's like, he is telling people, because I could tell, because you can tell by the way Steve argues that he's telling people how to use it. So I said, "Okay." So I sat down, and I really actually, and I think I got the order wrong, because I've done this before. Really, I got in with Carrier, because I just said, I'm going to really get it from beginning to end, so I can repeat it to him blindfolded. So I go up to Steve finally. It took about 4 hours. It's not, if you have a background in it, it's not that, but just I wanted to get all of it down. So I said, okay, Steve, this is what you're saying. He goes, yep. So this is what you're saying. He goes, yep. So this is what you're saying. He goes, yep. Nick, he goes, you got it. Why is it? It's like, okay, great, Steve. I'm not going to do any of it. And he's like, yeah, I don't care. I was just like, yeah.
I wasn't trying to convince him. Said you? Yeah. I was like, I just wanted him to understand it. That's all, and he did.
I trolled him, and what I did was I started seeing other threads that he was in, and I waited a little while because I wanted to be cute about it, but I trolled him, and then I go in another thread that he's in, and somebody's arguing this. I was like, oh yeah, atheism is lack of belief. Here, boom, drop a couple memes, and I was waiting for him to say, Nick, you know better. Nick, never came. And then I just kept. And that's
because I have Nick blocked on Twitter. Just FYI. Okay.
Yeah,
I have him muted.
Steve,
sorry.
This is the first time Steve's hearing this story. Steve's like, "You were dropping shit on those things."
Now I know why I'm muted.
Well,
yeah.
But this is the thing in philosophy, in particular, because this was funny. This is when for me, there was a light bulb moment, because it's been a while since I took a philosophy class, but I miss hanging out with everybody in the philosophy department. I miss hanging out with all the students, with everybody who's learning it. But the one thing that you can always find, you could always tell who was a real philosopher in the philosophy department, and they were the ones who cared less about even converting other people to their ideas, but having other people understand it, and having people get what you're saying, whether it's right or wrong. That's you can always go places, but it's the understanding that they cared about. I was just like, oh shit, Steve really just wants to be understood. And I said this to Steve afterwards. I think the reason is because he believes quite firmly that his way is, well, it's not his way. It's what he's arguing for.
I'll argue it's a better way, but I never even get to that part of the discussion half the time.
Well, but I think your opinion usually is people will figure that out on their own if they understand it.
Right.
So all you care about is that they understand it.
That's my primary thing, right? I mean,
yeah.
I very rarely argue why I think it's better. I have before, but it's usually you have to be at a certain level to even get to that point to have that argument. So if I can get somebody at least at that point, you're right. I think that most people will eventually come to the conclusions I have, and hundreds, maybe even thousands of atheists have by now. A lot of atheists. I mean, I'm not trying to inflate my numbers, but I get a lot of messages. And I would say that many hundreds of atheists, at the very least, have changed their positions because they have listened to what I had to say, came to their own conclusions, evaluated on their own accord, and not just blindly listened to Matt or Aaron going, yeah, fuck that guy, Steve, man, he's a prescriptivist. And, he tells us how we have to use words, which is bullshit. Steve prescribes that you must use these words, bullshit. That's just misinformation, because anybody who ever watches me knows that's completely wrong. I've never done any of that.
Well, like I said, I mean, that's why I mean, that's a story that just needs to, what I tried to call Steve on it, and I got my ass handed to me, because he really is never told
Other
me
people
how
have as well.
to this day. He never tells me how to do it.
Nick, you know as well as I do, there's people out there that love running narratives. They do what's called trial balloons. Let's throw this up there and see what sticks, right? One of the things they tried one time, and even still to this day a little bit, is that if Steve has people that he doesn't associate with, if you hang out with them, Steve doesn't want you on his channel. He'll block you.
Yeah, that's a weird one too.
That's a weird one. The manager of my other channel hangs out with people I will never discuss on air, ever. Unless barring a cataclysmic event, I want nothing to do with them, and I won't even mention their names because I don't want to give them any attention, because they thrive on attention, right? But I trust him. right? And I'm like, and he can have anybody he wants on his channel. He can talk to anybody he wants. I don't care who you talk to, right? I just keep them away from my channel here. But people are adults. You could go have sex with EOT and have a beer with him and call him your bestie and go play ping pong with him. I don't give a fuck as long as the next day you're hanging out with me and I tell you I think he's a piece of shit, but I don't give a shit what the hell you do, right?
Well, there are some things in the example you just gave that are slightly less likely than others, but
fair enough.
Yeah,
you're not gonna have sex with EOT.
Yeah, no, I think we're gonna put that on the below Snowball and Hell. Yes. Okay, here's a good example. Ozzy also hangs out with some people that, I know you're not friends with, but it doesn't matter. You're still best friends with Ozzy. I mean, it's just, it's. I don't think.
Well, he's not like my boyfriend, but I mean, we're buddies.
Jesus.
We're friends.
I hope he's not listening.
Yeah, he's a jealous type.
Oh boy.
Princess Rand says, "There's so many people I like here. Don't know if they know it, but I do. Shout out to Cheshire. Thank you very much."
And shout out to.
Cheshire's. And to Nick.
I'm good.
To Nick. Shout out to Nick, guys.
I'm gonna get snowballed in hell. You see, Smitty, wait a minute.
How is Cheshire able to text from the basement, anyways? I don't understand how she keeps on connecting to the Wi-Fi. I changed the password, and she still finds it. I don't know.
Why do you wait till I'm drinking something till you say something like that? You always do that to me.
Yeah. So, once again, what am I doing next month? By the way, Nick, who am I going out with?
Where are you going next month? Or?
No, who have I got a date with?
No. I have a mental block on that. I think, the woman I already dated.
You went out with her once! That doesn't count! It ain't no sloppy second shit.
Yeah, but I love the sudden drastic raise of the level of your voice on that one. You're over it. You're over it.
I'll live, whatever.
Yeah.
But okay, so anyways, this was fun, and again, nothing too deep. It's just I wanted to get my point out to people that I think Matt is just, I don't know what he's trying to tell people half the time. And I think when he starts running these things like, well, Gnosticism has to do with knowledge, he's not doing anybody a service, especially when he knows that agnostic atheism, as he's even said, is nonsensical. So at least you guys can see where I'm coming from in all this. It's not like I'm pulling this shit out my ass. There's reasons for this. Lukewarm Lettuce says, I'd like to again thank Steve, Nick, and guest for inspiring me to return to school. Love learning about philosophy. Would enjoy debate on free will. Okay. Maybe
I'd love to do that one.
Maybe I can get Scott Clifton to come in on that because I know that's one of his favorite topics.
I would love to. I would love to do that, especially with Scott Clifton. But
when he's free, he's a busy guy. But I know he wants to have a discussion on that at some point. I talked to him the other day about this very topic, and I explained to him that I tend to compatibilism, and I don't, because he asked, if you build an AI, can an AI have free will ever? And I think no. I don't think that an AI, like a human, can ever have a case where they have libertarian free will, where they're completely free of undue external influence, because the very act of thinking, the only very act of having a conscious decision is somehow influenced always by some external factor, such that if giving the same conditions, called cerebus paribus, but if you exact some conditions, you would make the same choice every single time, would be a determinist position. But in the indeterminist position, which would be libertarian free will, says that you might make a different choice given the same exact conditions. I don't think that you would, and I don't think an AI would either. Now, this is philosophy where, there is no right answer. It's what do you want to believe on this?
Because there's no way. It's the only thought experiment you can do is if you go back in time,
right,
and ask the same question again. I give this example too, which is when somebody asked me to pick a number between 1 and 10. The answer, the number I most commonly give is -3, and because I'm an asshole that way, that's the one I think of. But okay, there's a process that went on in my mind to reach the conclusion. And even if I was going to just pick a random number, I think you go back in time, someone's going to come up with the same number every time.
Yeah, but even if you did, you have to go back an infinite amount of time there always be that one time where they, for some reason, an anomaly, and they pick something different. Now you could run a statistical thing and say, well, I've gone back in time 1,000,000 times, therefore I'm going to have induction here that it probably would be the same, and you'd be fair to make that argument, assuming uniformity of nature. But by the way, I don't think you can go back in time. Another.
Yeah, I don't think
another,
there's any way to.
Yeah, Princess Ryan. It's pronounced Rhine, like Rhineland. Oh, I'm sorry, Rhine. Princess Ryan. Okay. Thank you, Princess Ryan. Kawasa, 10,000 won. Thanks for the daily dose of smugs. Wear your glasses. Contacts, dude. I got contacts now.
Somebody noticed.
Yeah, I got contacts, so I'm going to be wearing contacts from now on. I think I look better with contacts. I like them better. And I did buy a smug. Paid full price for it. Even get this special discount.
I bought a smug too. I don't know when it's. I think there was a little bit of a.
Because I'm having a Subway cup. This is how cheap I am right now because I couldn't find my green glass.
Yeah, I gotta get out of my.
I don't know where it went. I have four of them too. I don't know where any of them are at.
Sygart wants to talk to me about that because he thinks because to the best of my knowledge, and I know that in quantum mechanics they think they found it, but to the best of my knowledge, nobody has ever found anything that truly has been demonstrably is random. That we don't understand, yes, but I don't think randomness exists in the universe. Okay. And if randomness doesn't exist in the universe, I think you got a problem.
I'm going to give you pushback on a little bit.
Yep.
Yes, I have both contacts in. Okay. Randomness. The way randomness is thought of is stochastic. And so if you have an event that is unable to be determined by any means possible, such as spontaneous fission, weak nuclear decay, virtual particles, these things are stochastic in nature, that they are what I would be considered true random events because there's no information in the system to even allow for any kind of deterministic mechanism by which they occur, meaning that it is completely non-deterministic. It is random by any measurable sense of the word. And I think if you go back in time, those random fluctuations would be different. I mean, again, there's no way to demonstrate this, but you wouldn't have the same random distributions each time if it's truly random.
I agree if it's truly random that would be the case. I agree that in stochastic sense, it is truly random, and for all intents and purposes that we can measure, I don't think that proves that if you went back in time, and for me, that's the bar on determinism.
Right.
But my bar on determinism is going to have problems because if there is a single example of, so what I argue is essentially it's a gaps argument because right now we can't determine how, but that doesn't mean it's not. There's no. But
that's philosophy. We can't determine, but we still pick a position sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. But if in the end you can't determine if there's truly no way to determine it, then there's no difference between that and randomness. So it's random. I mean, it's indefensible.
And by the way, I'm probably never going to have a discussion with Matt only because he strawmanned me so many times, and I just don't think it'd be productive, and nor do I really want to be honest with you. I think that Matt needs to actually have discussions with other people running the same arguments, and so the more people out there that know my arguments, and the more people out there that have discovered for themselves that Matt might not be putting out. I'm not going to say he's wrong, right? But I'm thinking that he's not putting it out really. This is weird because it's one of those things, again, it's a complex thing where it's not necessarily wrong, but it's not normative and it's not how things are thought of. And I think it's a little bit misleading, right? So I think as more people discover this, then more people will challenge him on it and maybe he'll have to reflect upon it there. But I'm not the person to be having a discussion with Matt on this. I'm not. It is other people like yourselves out there that he hasn't had it formed a bias and he hasn't had any kind of a negative disposition to for whatever reason. You guys are the ones to be able to do that, not me. And by the way, I want to thank Kitty in the live chat. Kitty a while back had heard, she was not a fan of mine, probably still isn't, but she had heard a lot of negative things. She's seen my interactions on Twitter and she just never had a really good vibe about me. But she was very open-minded, at least have a nice conversation with me in private. For several hours, I discovered she's very nice. I answered all her questions, and now she's in my live chat watching, the show. This, to me, is what I consider to be what the Great Debate community is about. It is about reaching out. It is about having people that, from different positions. She doesn't have to agree with me on shit, but you know what? She's still watching, and she's still enjoying the content, and I think that maybe even learning something because she was willing to do so, and I want to thank her for that. So.
She's a patron on In Time too.
Oh, well, there you go.
If you're going to talk to Matt about any of these positions, if you're going to talk to Matt about any of these positions, the first thing you need to do is don't say Steve McRae said, because you won't finish the word
It's
said
true.
before the phone is hung up on you. So leave Steve out of it.
I agree.
Just
I agree. Very good point. By the way, Kitty's like, I'm here for Nick. Who the hell are you, Steve? Fair enough. Fair enough. I get it. But you know what? You're right. If you call the atheist experience and you mention my name, holy shit, do they lose their minds? You can't get past the call screener. But like Nick said, if you go read my blog, especially like burden of proof and blah this, and you don't let them steamroll you, then you can argue. But I've seen one person do this, and Matt just got shit all wrong. He's trying to tell the caller that disbelief is one thing, and the caller's like, look, no, Matt, he's the guy obviously studied logic. He's like, disbelief is that you hold the position that something's false. This is what it is understood in philosophy, in logic. So if I say I disbelieve P, that's an epistemic disposition that holds in the negation of the proposition. This is ubiquitous. This is like level one logics. And yet Matt is like, no, that's not what disbelief means. Disbelief just means I don't have a belief in it. No, Matt, that's called unbelief. You're making shit up. Now, if you want to use these terms in your own special way, that's fine. But you cannot tell a caller that he's wrong when he uses the term normatively in the entire field of philosophy. This is the part where I call them out on it, right? Because somebody will say, well, yeah, Nick, yeah, Matt, you could use this your own way, but that's not how it's understood in the literature. Show me I'm wrong. Because I guarantee it, they'll never show your paper that's otherwise that I've ever seen. They don't like papers, but go ahead.
Well, there's a couple papers. There's what's his name that you mentioned earlier from a while back.
Flu?
Yeah.
Flu does not use disbelief in any other way, but I say, and also Flu actually acknowledges on page 2 of his paper that atheism is the belief that God does not exist. He that's his argument. He says, while atheism is understood to be the belief that God does not exist, I want it to be understood as in the negative. So he's actually acknowledging the way that I use these terms, but he's arguing that it should be in the weak case, just like you argue from a utilitarian point of view. Or utility point of view. I keep on saying utilitarian. It's not utility. From a utility point of view, that you're arguing when I'm discussing this with a certain audience, I should use these terms. Fair. That's a fine argument. I wouldn't use it for myself, obviously, but it's not a bad argument.
Yeah, you're not shooting it down. It's just not your
tea,
that's all.
Yeah. And so, but he's doing the same thing. He's saying, I think we should use this terminology in this regard. Unfortunately, pretty much every philosopher didn't agree with him. The only ones that may have was Stephen Dillahunty, who is a theist, by the way, and also, not that it shouldn't matter, but he agreed with him, and Michael Martin, but at the same time, Michael Martin had some issues with it as well. So, but Michael Martin, he actually had a paper, it was a book, but he wrote about negative atheism having a burden of proof. Here's an atheist philosopher going, as negative atheists, we still need to justify why we do not believe. And yet, here's Matt going, oh, no, that's bullshit. Steve's wrong on that. Well, maybe you're wrong, Matt. I mean, this is what I love about Matt when he goes, well, Steve always quotes philosophers. Well, who am I supposed to quote?
Yeah, well, I think there is a sense that you're trying to use an argument from authority.
It is in some degree, but it's a legit argument from authority, and but it's also
it's not the fallacy.
It's not the fallacy,
and we've had that discussion before. Where if somebody engages ad hominem, it's not necessarily the ad hominem fallacy. They're just being ad hominem. Those are two different things.
But Matt, he goes on a limb and he's like, Steve says he's right because philosophers say he's right. I've never said that ever. And that's an outright mischaracterization. This is what Matt does. He's had multiple mischaracterizations of me. I don't have Flu's paper right handy.
I'm looking for it,
but it's easy to find. It really is easy to find.
Anthony Flew, 1972. It's called The Presumption of Atheism, and it was in the Canadian Journal of Philosophy. I don't have the paper, but that's how you find it.
Very easy to find. It's out there. And now I've read the whole thing 2 times, but I don't, maybe more the first couple pages, but I don't even care about the second part of it. I don't really care about his argument. The best part of that paper is the first 2 pages, because it's actually everything that I've said. He would agree with me wholeheartedly that atheism is the belief that God does not exist, but he's trying to change it. But his argument, I think it has some major flaws to it, but that's for another day.
Hold on. I think one dork, Norvers, says Nick is a dick. Who is one dork? Who is that guy? I don't know.
Yeah, screw that guy. How'd he get mods?
He's the one I'm teaching philosophy to, for crying out loud.
He's a theist, right?
Yes, he is.
Yeah, so that's all we got to know. Yeah, whatever. How do theists get mods in my... What are we doing here, guys? How do theists get mods?
Oh, God, we block him. Block him.
Wait, Cheshire, are you still down there? How did he get mods? Yeah, it's so funny when people say, well, Steve has an echo chamber. I'm like, you fucking... What the hell's wrong with you people? I got mods that are polytheist, theist. I don't give a fuck. I don't understand how anybody can think that this channel is a echo chamber. Because if I hear one more person say, well, if you disagree with Steve, you get blocked. Hello, half my audience disagrees with me half the time. That's what I like. I like the disagreements, but I like
Ansgar. Ansgar.
Screw that guy too. How do he get mods? Oh, whatever.
We were on myself. We were on with Ansgar, and I've forgotten his name, but it was the four of us a while back, and Ansgar said it was so hilarious because Ansgar said, Steve, I'm going to give you some pushback on that, and your face lit up. You were like, oh,
I like that shit. I do.
Yeah, I was like, Steve doesn't respect people who just, no.
I don't want people that just buy into me and say, oh, yeah, whatever Steve says. I don't want that. I like the pushback because I got to tell you, the people that give me pushback, and when I explain to them how they're wrong, they're like, fuck. Yeah. So, yeah, of course I want some pushback. I want people to challenge me. Why would I not? Because that gives me an opportunity to go, oh, I see where their error is, and address it. This is what happened on the Discord on the ACA today. A person was like, Steve, I just don't see how anything you're saying right now makes sense. It is just absolutely not making sense to me from what I know about this. And I told the guy, you're a really nice guy. And I had never met him before, but he was like thrilled to meet me. He's like, God, I love your channel, Steve. But you say things I don't understand. And I said, okay, how about we do this? Forget everything you think you know about this right now. Just tabula rasa. Just put it all to the side. Forget everything you think these words mean by what ACA is and everything's told you. And I said, can you do that? He said, yes. I said, okay, let's use these terms as it would be in philosophy, with, as if you went to go read it. I said, can you do that? He's like, yes. Okay. So using the terminology that I'm going to tell you, see if this makes sense of what I've just told you before that you said didn't make sense. And after I got done, he's like, holy shit. I get it. He's like, yeah, the way you're explaining it, using the terminology that you use, everything you said now makes sense to me. It didn't make sense because I was using the ACA uses of it. I'm like, there you go. So you have to understand the domain of discourse that you're referring to when you're using terms, because I'm going to use them in a different way than the ACA is. And I get that. But I don't care if the ACA uses it any way they want. They're not going to tell me how to use words. They're the prescriptivist. They're the ones saying, if you don't believe, you're an atheist, bar none, right? Especially American atheist, not so much ACA, but American atheist does that. But real quick, is it 19 pages?
19 pages.
Is it that long? I know it's pretty long, but
I've actually never read it, and it's one of those. It's on my. I should read it, but I haven't.
It's not a difficult.
I think I've gone over it. You know what? I've flipped through it. That's about the best I can say I've done. It's also reasonably old, and it's not necessarily the areas that I'm most interested in. It's only recently I've started engaging on this level of philosophy.
Macabre says, I disagree with you, Steve. Can we get rid of him? No, I'm just kidding.
I already did. As soon as I saw, I didn't realize it was a.
How you doing, Macabre? I love you, brother.
Again? What's he?
I gotta tell you, like Macabre, if he thinks there's a problem, he's no nonsense, and I really respect him.
Oh Jesus, yeah, he don't mess around.
He don't mean it.
Pissed at you.
But Macabre has been around since the Great Debate Community on G+. He goes way old school back with me. So he has seen firsthand the shit that I and Reds have talked about, where a lot of the new people in the community has not recognized and not seen these things firsthand. So they have to kind of take it upon, an understanding that me and Reds are pretty reputable people, and what we're telling people is the honest fucking truth about certain individuals, and believe what you want about it. But Macabre is one of those very, very rare people that have been around for years that has seen this shit firsthand. And so I'm thrilled when I still have somebody around going, yeah, oh yeah, I remember when that happened. Oh yeah. But what's worse is when he said, hey Steve, I've been telling you about this certain person for years. Fair enough. He was right on a few people that I was like, at least I wasn't defending, but I was like, let's try to give him the benefit of the doubt. And after a while I was like, no, you're right, dude. Fuck this guy.
Well, I'm glad too, because the reverse also happens, which is every now and then Steve is like, Nick, just be careful with this person. I was just like, okay, yeah, cool. I got it. But I'm going to make my own opinion. I'm not just going to let Steve. And then, I call back Steve. Yeah, Steve, I think maybe you were right. He's like, yeah, I know. I was just like, okay,
now,
about it.
Now, I'm sorry you had to find out by Cheshire about that. I'm sorry you had to come to that conclusion on your own, but it is what it is.
Yeah, well, yeah, that bit me hard. That bit me hard.
She likes to bite.
A while to recover from that.
She is a biter. Yeah.
She likes to play, but that's not the kind of softball. I like softball. She likes like sort of major leagues. Just like I'm sitting there.
Cheshire. Smitty's like Cheshire. So we're gonna be wrapping this up, but I will tell you, I need one more dollar Patreon. I'm at a threshold, and I just want to hit that threshold. But anybody who wants to Patreon to me, I appreciate it. I'm gonna put my link in the video description. Again, I lost a couple only because I wasn't going to cater to their capitulations that I stopped doing Cheshire's and me on Caffeine Corner. I told them to basically, I appreciate it, your patronage.
You're doing Cheshire on.
What do you think? Why do you think we have such high ratings? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no wonder it's going, but the YouTube just has changed.
Yeah, right.
Well, now I'm going to talk to Ansgar now because I guess
we blur shit out.
Change our show.
Oh, dude, you start doing you and him on camera? Yeah. No, we blur stuff out, but I mean, I'm not going to let people tell me what to do on my channel. And it's so funny because I have some people going, "Damn, I love Cheshire. She's a great thing since sliced bread." And then I got a few other people going, "That chick adds nothing to the conversation." And I'm like,
yeah, that's kind
those are my favorite ones because I adore Cheshire. I think we make a very good team. And when I hear people say stupid shit like that, I'm like, really? So you think that she's not adding anything to the conversation? Then what the hell do you want? I don't understand this at all. I think it's pretty fucking hilarious. But if you don't think she is, and you don't like Caffeine Corner, you don't want to be a patron any longer, go with God. I'm like, what am I supposed to do? I'm not going to stop you. But Princess Ryan again, I got it right that time. No Patreon, but here's $2. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's fine. I'm 3 patrons away from 150 patrons, and I think that'd be a cool. I've never had 150 patrons before. I've had 148, I think, at one time, 149. I dropped down 3, I think. I didn't gain 1 or 2. But if I can get to 150 patrons, that's 3 people, even for $1 a piece. Now, 5-10 is great, by the way, but to me, I'm one of those people, $1 Patreon. The fact that they're Patreoning to me, I'm thrilled to death. I do have a couple $50 and $100 Patreons, but they're rare, obviously. But I do have quite a few actually. But it's even whether you're a $100 Patreon or $1 Patreon, you all get the same appreciation. The fact that you're a Patreon, and I do appreciate it. So, anyways, guys, wrap it up. Any other questions for me or Nick or I?
Been too long, Steve. It's really been, and we've both been. There's always been just one. But I'm so glad to be doing this again because I miss doing these. And then next week we got Ozzy on, and we're doing
you don't know what the hell we're doing. You don't even remember.
Non-cognitivism. Atheism and
atheism and theological cognitivism.
Yes,
we're also going to get into what's called, you're going to hate this properly, and people are not going to the fuck I'm talking about. But I told Ozzy I have my own views on certain things, right? And I want to run them by him to see if they're valid, or at least make sense. And so I'm going to be getting into what's called the Frege-Geach embedding problem, as it applies to theological cognitivism, which I've never seen before. Now, I like running my own arguments, right? Anybody can parrot somebody else's arguments. I like to make my own arguments up. Yeah. And I've not seen the Frege-Geach embedding problem applied to theological cognitivism. I've seen it applied to moral non-cognitivism, right? But if you're not familiar with what it is, and I don't expect you to know what it is, Nick, by the way.
I don't.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. It's okay. I don't expect most people to know what the embedding problem is. But I will be explaining the embedding problem, why it's an issue for non-cognitivists, and why that I wonder if it's not. Why isn't it a problem for a theological non-cognitivist? Because a lot of people say I'm an atheist. God's incoherent, blah blah blah. And I had this discussion on the ACA with somebody today. They're like, "Yeah, well, God's not coherently defined by anybody." I'm like, "A creator of the universe." Okay, but that doesn't describe all gods. Well, you didn't ask for that. You asked for how do you coherently define God? I just gave you a coherent thing for it. I gave you one defeater. That's all it takes. And I think people use the term atheist to try to avoid having a real conversation. And I know Ozzy's not a big fan of it either. And Oppie, when I talked to Oppie about it, Oppie thinks that atheism falls under strong atheism. So does Michael Martin. I understand their argument. I don't necessarily agree with them. And that's weird because I love Oppie to death, right? But this is philosophy. You don't have to agree with your idols. right? I don't necessarily agree with it falls into strong
rarely,
atheism.
people rarely do. I mean, the whole point is their idols sort of show them the patterns and how the thinking's done.
I got
and then
150
use those tools to make something new.
Thank you, people. I got 3 Patreons tonight. Yes, thank you very much.
Oh, nice.
I am. Thank you. I'm at my goal. Thank you. Thank you for that $10,000 a month Patreon, whoever that was. Yeah, right. I'd retire. But no, I very much thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. If I can stick at 150, I will be set. I'm very happy for that. That doesn't mean that if people want to go on, but
you're not saying no.
150 is my floor.
Let's not affirm the consequent on that one. Let's just.
But I think people are going to be. I think people, and I will thank each one of you when I get off air here. But I want to people to see that next week we're going to be talking about some really cool philosophy, because I think the Fred Geach embedding problem is a very good topic. I think it really discusses why non-cognitivism has issues. It has to deal with making simple sentences complex. And I think that the people that subscribe to this ichtheist position haven't really fully thought it through, just like agnostic atheist. So I want atheists to be better at argumentation, and I want them to be fully informed. And I just don't think that a lot of atheists, when they say, well, I'm an ichtheist, do you really know what you mean by that? Because this person I talked to in the Discord, she was using it in a very bizarre means. And I'm like, do you understand? You're using this word so atypically that no philosopher is going to be using it as you do. Well, yeah. I'm like, then why are you using that word? Because it already has an understanding in philosophy, and you're using it so atypically to mean something completely different. It has no value at that point as a word, because that's not how the words. That's like saying, well, I'm a theist, but what I mean by that is I believe all gods are bullshit. Okay, sure, you can do that, but does it really make any sense to do that? Because you tell somebody I'm a theist, and they say, oh, so what God do you believe in? And you say, no, I think all gods are bullshit. And they say, well, that's not theism. Well, it is to me. That's how I'm using it. That's what I hear. Right?
One dork Verds is again saying, I'm an agnostic atheist.
Gwyn says for $5, I like Cheshire, although her perkiness sometimes breaks my inner Buddha. Yeah,
Buddha.
She's perky. Fred Geach on theological and cognitive. Now I'm scared, right? Yeah, well, Chemo, you know a little bit about philosophy, so you probably do know what the Fred Geach embedding problem is and how it relates to moral non-cognitivism. So I'm going to try to relate it to theological non-cognitivism, and we'll see how it goes. Because I have not seen any paper that has done this. So I'm trying to think outside the box here. I could be wrong. They could be out there.
I think I've seen this, so this is a linguists issue. Because I've seen this before, but this was when I was studying linguistics, so it's a different. I'm gonna enjoy it. I'm gonna learn something.
I don't want to give too much away because then they won't watch the show.
Yep.
But it basically, in a nutshell, is how do you form complex logical arguments if you're in a non-cognitive position like emotivism or prescriptivism? You can't really get a complex, meaningful thing out of a syllogism because these are not truth apt things. Emotivism is not truth apt. Prescriptivism is not truth apt. So I can start with a truth apt syllogism, but once I convert it to a non-cognitivist, how does it have any cognitive meaning to it? Now I'll explain it more in detail. But I think you guys are going to like it. So, but it's with Ozzy and Nick. How can we go wrong, right?
It's going to be a non-cognitivism. That was when you were talking about that earlier too. I was like, I want Ozzy around because that is not my wheelhouse, but I'm going to enjoy it. It's going to be like being back in school again. I'm going to enjoy it.
This is next Friday, by the way. People are asking.
Yep.
I probably around 5 or 6. No, it's probably going to be earlier my time. It might be at 3 my time, but it will be on Friday. Steve the Philosopher. Steve and Jism. By the way, Steve's a philosophist. I mean, he's been around the community for a very long time. He knows philosophy. But we have a lot of people that have been around for a very long time. Damn. We're getting old on social media.
Yeah. Yeah, we're getting old in real life.
You've just started. Yeah. You don't even know what road ahead of you have.
I
told Nick when he started his channel, I told Ansgar especially, having a show is not easy as you fucking think it is.
No.
Was I right?
And there are complications that you don't even begin to consider. I want to tell you one before that. So I just saw one of the first not one of the first streams I did with you, but a stream from like 2 months ago. And I had half as much gray hair. I shit you not. In 2 months, it's noticeable. I was going, yeah. And then I also saw that first non-sex show, which was a bit over a year ago, I think. And there was almost no gray. It's amazing how rapidly it is on set. But I've started blogging on the difficulties in making a show because it was much harder than I thought. It's one that there's always just complications. We had some difficulties with our guest yesterday, but it wasn't just a guest; it was a failure of communication on everybody's part. There was issues everywhere.
It is not easy to get everybody together. It takes coordination, it takes dedication, and you got to know a little about the topic.
Yep, and you got to get 20 people all paddle. It's like I have to imagine it's like running one of those the boats. The you know what I'm talking. Crew.
Yeah,
it's
your
like,
crew
doing a.
Of the oars.
And everybody has to, and one person screws it up, and it's a cascade, and it's a whole, and you don't have enough time to get all the things done that you really feel like you need to get done. So you have to sit there the entire time saying, we're going to let that go, we're going to let that go, and then everyone disagrees with it. Oh, no, we can't let that. We're going to let that go, and we're going to do this.
And by the way, as you progress, a lot of things that you start with, you're like, you know what, fuck this. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm changing this up. It's just a natural progression. And I use that term in the correct way rather than saying, oh, it's just a natural progression that the show ended.
Yeah.
Really?
Well, actually, it was a natural progression after you kick out one partner. I think that's...
people are going to watch this video 5 years from now and go, what the hell is Steve talking about? But the people in my lab chat know natural progression in my ass.
Okay.
Really? Is that what you consider a natural progression? Kicking out the co-host, taking all the money? Natural progression? Okay.
When I'd watch non-sec, I'd see you guys with inside jokes. I'd be like, the audience doesn't get it, and it's a little rude. And now it's like Ansgar and I, it's the only way to blow off steam. Sometimes Ansgar and I just like tell an inside joke. And it's like, I'm sorry to the audience, but I have to blow off
That's one of my favorite things. I love the inside joke shit, especially with the people that have been coming out of the community for years. Because when I started the G+ community, the Great Debate community, we had a wiki. We had our own wiki. Right? And God, did we have people write some beautiful shit on there about everything. Unfortunately, it was against the terms of service for fandom, wiki fandom, and I recognize this. And so when they deleted it, I wasn't heartbroken because I knew it was going to go away eventually. But I did save all the information. Eventually, I will put it on my personal page, which I own the domain www.greatdebatecommunity.com. I also own the trademark, and I'm also getting it registered internationally. So I do have legal, things for this.
You've picked up a few.
It's very expensive, by the way. Shit, I tell you.
I guess I'm aware.
Yeah, it's not cheap, but it's worth it. So I'm right now. I'm starting the paperwork for international trademarking. The lawyer that I'm same lawyer. He actually does this as well. He's already started this process. So I like one shop deal, things. I'm like, because I asked a while back, I was like, do you do trademarking as well? He's like, yeah. I was like, well, international trademarking. Okay, let's get this ball get us going. So it takes a while, but you get what they do is you submit it and they kick it back to you and say, we accept it or you don't accept it. And if you don't accept it, you've got to reapply, but you got to fix what it is they tell you to fix on it. But anyways, the inside joke thing. Yeah, when you have a show and you're doing it 4 or 5 times a week, you pick up a lot of inside joke. And so my audience that have been around for a very long time, they're going to catch a lot of things, I think, But the new people, maybe not, but the new people, welcome. I want to have an influx coming in with Cheshire and I on Caffeine Corner, with Nick and I on Ask a Philosopher. We're going to be pushing a lot of shows next month. We're going to be pushing marketing. We're going to be doing a whole bunch of shit, especially theoretically, if I can get the other channel back, people know, we're going to be doing stuff with that as well. So it's in the works, maybe. But hold off. I can't say anything for sure.
Let's explain it just because people are going to be confused.
You explain it. I can't talk about it.
Yeah, he's trying to get back X-Hamster, and it's been out of his control for a while.
Pornhub had that domain as well.
The direction they took it in was just not. So he's trying to get that back, and we're hoping.
Macabre says $5. Rocket Ronnie. Position, power bottom, never forget. There you go. People see again. I remember all this old school stuff, right? Rocket Ronnie. God, I almost kind of miss him in a way. What's wrong with me?
Well, I think I don't think we have that kind of time left in the show, Steve.
I'm reminiscing though. I'm having a.
Oh, okay, reminisce. Yep.
Pornhub is Canadian. Yeah, Canadians own all that shit. Actually, I think.
Do they?
Yeah,
That's
yeah. There's one.
clever.
There's one company. I don't know their domain. The name they do, but that one domain, like one the company owns like all of it. Yeah. All right, but yeah, we are going to wrap this up. This is fun, but I'm probably going to have a hangout tomorrow, general hangout or rum and coke. I haven't decided yet, but I think we kind of need to blow off some steam, and then I'm going to be doing Caffeine Corner on Monday. I'm going to have one other hangout during that week at some point, and then also Friday with Ozzy and Nick. So there you go. That's our schedule. And then next week I'm taking some time off. People know I'm going to LA. I'm going to be going to hang out with the wonderful, beautiful, intelligent.
What? I missed that. I didn't hear that.
Sweet Heathen.
Well, they could. I was going to talk over that, but your mic cut out, so I couldn't even tell you where to talk. So that just worked out either way.
Sweet Heathen.
Oh, shoot, that one got through.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Good night, guys. Thank you very much. Appreciate the new Patrons. I picked up 4 Patrons, so thank you very much. It does mean something because I live off my Patreon right now. That is my source of income. I am doing this full time. This is my job. When people say get a real job, you try doing this, motherfuckers. Yeah. Okay, the people that say that I'm talking about, not my audience, because I love you guys all and I appreciate everything you've done and how supportive you've been. And I'm trying to keep you guys in the loop as much as possible. I really am. I am limited right now, but in 2 weeks, I don't think I'll have that limitation any longer. So just bear with me, okay? But see you for Rum and Coke Night tomorrow and on Caffeine Corner on Monday. Nick, take us out. Promote your shit.
Oh, yeah. So Nicholas Lamar Suter on YouTube. I also have written a couple of books. The Water Thief, which was a rebuttal to Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, and that's gotten a lot of critical reviews, so check that out. And also Ansgar and I are doing the commentary show and news show In Time, which also has covered on occasion what's going on with Essence of Thought and with Steve. And
go watch them. They've done a great job. Because you know what? They get their shit and they fix it if they're wrong, and they talk about it, and they do it so on an intellectual level, and I've really been enjoying In Time. Really been enjoying it. I'm almost pissed off that I didn't think of that shit. But I did in a different way. But you guys are doing a wonderful job with that. And I also want to shout out to the Modern Day Debate, even though that I think that he's wrong for having T jump on all the time. I like watching that kind of. I watched some of the other discussions that he had because I do like the debates, but I don't want to debate any longer. I wanted to listen and kind of evaluate. I don't really give a shit about convincing anybody in a debate any longer. It's just not my thing. I've done it, been there, whatever. All right. Good night, guys. Thanks to you for everything. And we will be seeing you tomorrow for Rum and Coke Night. Bring your own alcohol. Good night.